Chapter 1. The Unsettling Silence. The drive to Ravenshade Manor had been long and winding, the narrow road snaking through dense woods, thick with the encroaching autumn chill. Towering trees cast shadows that swallowed the faint sunlight, creating an almost twilight hue across the landscape. Emily Lancaster gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, as the overgrown path crunched under her tires. The estate had been abandoned for decades, a relic of another era, but it still loomed large in her family's murky past. She hadn't expected the isolation to feel so absolute. The iron gates appeared without warning, as though the manor had chosen to reveal itself only once she was close enough. Rusted and partially ajar, the gates gave way to a sweeping driveway choked by weeds and fallen branches. As her car rolled closer, Ravenshade Manor came into view. A massive stone structure, its dark silhouette standing tall against the gray sky. The windows were blackened with age, the roof sagging in places, and vines curled like skeletal hands around its weathered walls. The house was decaying, but its grandeur still clung to its bones. The silence was palpable when Emily turned off the engine. She sat for a moment, her breath fogging the glass, staring at the imposing front door. A cold breeze stirred, rattling the dead leaves around her feet as she stepped out of the car. The wind seemed to carry whispers through the trees, though no sound emerged, just the faint rustling of the world around her. For the first time, she noticed the utter absence of birdsong, the complete stillness of the air, as though nature itself was holding its breath. Ravenshade stood before her, vast and unyielding, its darkened windows like eyes watching her approach. The heavy door groaned as she pushed it open, the sound echoing down the cavernous hallways inside. Dust swirled in the air, disturbed by her arrival, while cobwebs draped the high corners like forgotten veils. The air inside was thick, damp, and cold, seeping into her skin as if the house itself had a pulse. Slow, deliberate, waiting. Emily set down her bags, her footsteps muffled on the rotting wooden floorboards. The grand foyer stretched into darkness, lit only by the gray light filtering in through the broken windows. Massive chandeliers hung overhead, their crystals dull and coated in grime, and faded portraits lined the walls. Ancestors, she assumed, their gazes following her as she moved deeper into the house. The floor creaked beneath her weight, and she paused, listening. Nothing. The silence swallowed every sound she made. She explored cautiously, each room revealing more of the house's long-neglected state. Time had worked its way into every crack and crevice. Furniture covered in tattered sheets, wallpaper peeling in long, jagged strips, and windows so filthy they blocked out any trace of the outside world. The house felt disconnected from time, as if it had existed like this for centuries, untouched by the world beyond its walls. The kitchen was no better, abandoned mid-use from some long-forgotten era. Plates and cups sat on the counters, dust thick upon their surfaces. The fireplace at the far end was blackened with soot, and the faint smell of something burnt still lingered in the air, as though the fire had only recently died. It gave her a strange feeling, like she wasn't truly alone. She found her way to the stairs, the banister smooth and cold beneath her hand as she ascended to the second floor. The further she ventured, the more the house seemed to close in around her. The corridors upstairs were narrower, the doors closed tightly, some warped with moisture, others locked. She hesitated before each one, expecting to hear something, some sign of life, footsteps, a faint breath, a creak of the floorboards. But there was only that overwhelming, suffocating silence. At the end of the hallway, she discovered a small room, its door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she was met with the sight of an ancient bed, its canopy sagging, the sheets brittle and yellowed with age. The walls were lined with bookshelves, each filled with dusty, forgotten volumes. A single window faced the forest, its glass cracked in a web-like pattern. The view beyond was obscured by fog, swirling and clinging to the gnarled trees. She turned away, unsettled by the scene outside, and noticed something odd. There, in the center of the room, was a small, unmarked box. It was out of place among the decaying furniture and musty air. Its surface was smooth and dark, almost untouched by time. As Emily knelt before it, she could feel the weight of the house pressing down on her, as though the walls were watching, waiting for her next move. She hesitated before touching it, her hand hovering just above the surface. Suddenly, a sharp creak echoed through the hallway, so sudden and loud in the silence that her heart raced. She spun around, her eyes scanning the empty corridor. The shadows seemed thicker now, the darkness less passive. She strained to hear anything, a repeat of the sound, a sign of someone or something, but there was nothing. The silence returned, even heavier than before. She turned back to the box, her nerves fraying. Carefully, she opened the lid. Inside was a tangle of old, brittle papers. She pulled one out gently, the faded ink barely legible. It was a journal entry written in spidery handwriting, her gray-tant's handwriting. The entry was dated decades ago, recounting strange occurrences in the house. The words were difficult to decipher, but one phrase stood out, sending a shiver through her. The house watches, it waits in silence. Emily's skin prickled. She stood quickly, leaving the box untouched, and made her way out of the room, the journal clutched tightly in her hand. She hurried back down the hallway, her footsteps quicker, as though something unseen was pressing her to leave. The house seemed different now, more alive, as if it had been dormant until her arrival. The walls felt closer, the air thicker. She descended the staircase in near darkness, the light outside fading quickly into dusk. In the foyer, she paused again, her breath shallow. The silence was back, suffocating, but now it was charged with something more. A presence, just at the edge of perception. She could feel it watching her, waiting in the shadows of the house, unseen but undeniable. As she turned toward the front door, ready to leave the oppressive weight of the manor behind her for the night, she froze. There, just beyond the threshold, were footprints in the dust, leading away from the door, deeper into the house. Chapter 2. Flicker in the dark. Emily stood frozen at the foot of the staircase, her gaze locked on the footprints stretching away from the front door. They trailed across the dust-laden floor and disappeared into the dim recesses of the manor. The prints were fresh, their outlines clear against the grime of decades. But they were not hers, and no one had entered the house, at least, no one she had seen. Her pulse quickened, a coldness spreading through her limbs as she forced herself to take a step forward, then another. She crouched down to inspect the prints, the air around her thick with the smell of age and decay. The footprints were small, smaller than hers, delicate as though left by a child. The weight distribution was uneven, as if the person had been limping. She felt a gnawing unease settle into her chest, the kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck rise without warning. Slowly, Emily rose to her feet, her eyes following the trail. They led away from the foyer, disappearing down a long, narrow hallway lined with portraits of her long-dead relatives. The frames were tarnished, and the faces within them were obscured by layers of dust and cobwebs, but their eyes gleamed faintly in the dim light, as though watching her every move. As she made her way down the hall, her footsteps seemed to echo unnaturally loud, the oppressive silence amplifying every creak of the floorboards beneath her. The air grew colder, biting into her skin, and she noticed that the once dusty floor ahead of her was swept clean, an unnatural cleanliness that didn't belong in a house so neglected. She reached the end of the hallway where the trail vanished into a door, one she hadn't noticed before. The wood was cracked and splintered, but it held firm as she pushed it open, the rusted hinges screeching in protest. The door led to a narrow stairwell, its steps disappearing into the darkness below. A sharp draft hit her, carrying the scent of damp earth and mildew. The basement. The darkness within seemed to pulse, as though it were alive, beckoning her to descend. Emily hesitated at the top of the stairs, her breath catching in her throat. The light from the hallway barely touched the first few steps, and beyond that, the blackness was complete, an abyss that seemed to swallow the air around it. She could feel the weight of the house pressing down on her again, as though it were waiting for her to step into its hidden depths. Taking a deep breath, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, flicking on the flashlight. The beam of light sliced through the gloom, revealing the rough, crumbling stone steps descending into the unknown. The silence here was deeper, more oppressive, and the air was thick with moisture. The walls were slick, stained with mold and dark streaks that ran like veins through the stone. Slowly, she descended, the floor creaking above her as though something were stirring, shifting within the house. Each step seemed to draw her deeper into the heart of the manor, the air growing colder with every breath. The basement felt different from the rest of the house, older, more primal, as though it existed outside the flow of time, untouched by the passage of years above. At the bottom of the staircase, her flashlight revealed a narrow corridor that stretched into the darkness. The walls were lined with old wooden shelves, their surfaces warped and decaying. Jars and bottles filled with unidentifiable substances sat forgotten, their contents long since rotted away. Cobwebs draped every surface, the spiders that spun them long dead or gone. The footprints reappeared, faint but unmistakable, leading her deeper into the corridor. She followed them, her heart pounding in her chest, each step bringing with it the weight of something unseen but ever-present, watching from the shadows. The silence was so thick now that it felt like a living thing, clinging to her skin and pressing in from all sides. She reached the end of the corridor and found herself standing before another door. This one made of iron, its surface pitted with rust. It was locked with a heavy chain, but the chain hung loose, as though it had been recently unfastened. The door stood slightly ajar, just wide enough for someone to slip through. Emily hesitated, her flashlight beam flickering as it illuminated the space beyond the door. Inside was a large, empty room, the stone floor covered in a thick layer of dust, except for a path of clean floor where the footprints continued, disappearing into the far corner of the room. The walls were lined with strange symbols carved into the stone, their meaning lost to time. The ceiling was low, the weight of the house above pressing down like a tomb. As she stepped into the room, the temperature dropped sharply, her breath misting in the air. The beam of her flashlight wavered again, the light dimming and flickering, casting shifting shadows across the walls. Her heart raced as she moved toward the corner, her pulse loud in her ears. Suddenly, the flashlight cut out, plunging the room into total darkness. Emily's breath hitched, her hand frantically tapping at the phone in an attempt to bring the light back. She blinked into the suffocating blackness, her eyes useless against the pitch dark. The silence was so complete now that she could hear her own heartbeat, pounding in her chest, loud and unsteady. And then, faintly, she heard it. The slightest sound, barely more than a whisper, coming from the far corner of the room. A soft, shuffling noise, as if something or someone was moving, dragging itself across the floor toward her. It was slow, deliberate, and unhurried. Each sound felt like a breath against her skin, closing the distance between them. Her fingers shook as she managed to switch the flashlight back on. The beam flickered to life, weak and sputtering, but enough to light up the corner of the room. There was nothing there. The corner stood empty, the footprints ending abruptly at the base of the wall. Emily's pulse thudded in her temples, the sense of dread clawing at her insides. She backed away slowly, her mind racing to make sense of what she had heard. There had been something, some movement in the darkness, but now it was gone, vanished into the suffocating silence of the basement. As she turned to leave the room, her flashlight flickered again, casting long, jagged shadows across the stone walls. The symbols carved into the stone seemed to pulse with an unnatural glow, just for an instant, before fading back into obscurity. The air around her felt charged, thick with something old, something waiting to be discovered. She hurried back through the corridor, her footsteps quick and uneven, the light from her phone barely holding steady. The stairs loomed before her, the narrow steps leading back to the surface. Emily climbed quickly, her breath coming in shallow gasps, the cold air biting into her skin. When she finally reached the top of the stairs, she stepped into the hallway and slammed the basement door shut behind her. The noise echoed through the house, disturbing the silence that had settled once more. She stood there for a moment, leaning against the door, trying to steady her breathing. The house seemed to settle around her, the silence growing even heavier, thicker. She could feel it now, the presence she had only suspected before. It was here, lurking in the shadows, just beyond her vision, waiting. The flicker of light in the dark had been its first warning. Emily looked down at the journal still clutched in her hand, the brittle paper now wrinkled and torn from her grip. She turned it over, her fingers tracing the faded words written by her great aunt long ago. One entry stood out above the rest, the ink darker, bolder than the others. "It begins in the dark." Her flashlight flickered one last time, casting the hallway into pitch-black silence. Chapter 3. The Unmarked Grave. The following morning, sunlight barely pierced through the dirty windows of Ravenshade Manor, casting weak, pallid light into the house. Emily awoke to a cold stillness that hung in the air like a veil. The events of the previous night lingered with her, a cold knot in her chest tightening as she remembered the footprints, the dark descent into the basement, and the flickering light that had failed her when she needed it most. She had barely slept, her mind plagued by the oppressive sense of being watched, even as she lay shrouded in her blankets. As she rose from the bed, the floorboards groaned beneath her feet, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence of the house. She looked out of the window at the woods surrounding the manor. The trees stood tall, gnarled and twisted, their branches bare against the overcast sky. A thick mist clung to the earth, swirling slowly, like something alive. The landscape outside seemed as unwelcoming as the house itself. The journal sat on the bedside table, its pages creased and yellowed. Emily picked it up, thumbing through the brittle sheets. The entries were cryptic, written in her great-aunt Victoria's neat, spidery handwriting. Many pages detailed the house, its eerie silence, the strange occurrences that had started shortly after Victoria had moved in, and her growing fear that something ancient and unseen lurked within the manor. One entry stood out from the rest, not because of its content, but because the ink was fresher than the others. The date was smudged, but it was the latest entry in the journal, written shortly before Victoria's disappearance. It read, "The earth calls. Beneath the roots, it stirs. There is no rest in this house, nor in the ground below." Beneath the roots. Emily stared at the words, feeling an odd sense of foreboding. The manor's basement had felt wrong, as if it were a wound in the earth that had never healed. But the journal spoke of something deeper, something buried, not within the house itself, but beneath it. She made her way downstairs, every step a creak, a reminder that the house was listening, always listening. The chill in the air was sharper, more pronounced now. The fire in the hearth had long since died, leaving only cold ash in its place. She could feel the dampness creeping into her bones as she crossed the threshold into the main hall. The footprints from the previous night had vanished, swallowed by the dust that had settled once more in their place. The hallway felt less like a living space and more like a tomb, cold, silent, and waiting for something. She glanced toward the basement door but hesitated. Today, her unease had shifted from the house itself to something more elusive, something outside, beyond the oppressive walls of the manor. Pushing open the front door, Emily stepped outside into the misty morning air. The cold bit into her skin, the wind whispering through the barren trees like a warning. The air was heavy with moisture, the ground beneath her feet soft and sodden. She could see the woods stretching out before her, a labyrinth of twisted trunks and gnarled roots. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, only that she needed to explore the land around Ravenshade. The journal had mentioned the earth, and something buried beneath it. The manor itself was ancient, but the grounds were older still, older than the trees, older than her family's connection to the house. There was history here, a dark history that had been buried, forgotten. But now, the earth itself seemed to want her attention. The mist clung to her as she walked, the manor slowly disappearing behind her as she ventured deeper into the woods. The trees grew denser the further she went, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to ensnare her. The ground was uneven, littered with roots and stones that jutted out from the earth like jagged teeth. Emily moved carefully, her breath coming in soft clouds in the cold air. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon something. A clearing, hidden deep within the woods. The mist parted just enough for her to see the ground ahead. There, in the center of the clearing, was a patch of earth that seemed disturbed, the soil dark and loose. It was an unmarked grave, freshly dug. No headstone, no sign of who, or what, had been buried there. A chill ran down her spine as she approached the grave, the silence of the woods pressing in on her from all sides. The air felt heavier here, almost suffocating, as if the ground itself held its breath. The disturbed earth looked freshly turned, the soil rich and black, but there were no signs of any recent activity. No footprints, no tools. It was as if the grave had simply appeared. Emily crouched beside the grave, her fingers hovering just above the soil. She didn't know what she expected to find, but she felt an almost magnetic pull to the earth, as though it called to her, whispering in a language she couldn't understand. The woods were unnaturally quiet, devoid of birds or the rustling of small creatures. Only the occasional moan of the wind broke the silence, a mournful sound that seemed to echo from the depths of the forest. As she brushed her fingers across the surface of the disturbed soil, she felt something, a slight vibration, a faint tremor that ran through the ground. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but unmistakable. The earth beneath her hand was not still. She recoiled, her pulse quickening. The sensation had been faint, but it was real. Something beneath the ground was moving, or at least shifting. She stood quickly, stepping back from the grave, her heart racing. The air felt different now, charged with a sense of impending danger. The mist swirled more violently around her, as if stirred by some unseen force. The journal's words echoed in her mind. Beneath the roots, it stirs. Emily turned her gaze to the trees surrounding the clearing, their roots twisted out of the ground, some stretching toward the grave as though reaching for whatever lay buried beneath. The earth beneath her feet felt alive, not with the hum of nature, but with something darker, more ancient. The grave, unmarked and forgotten, seemed like a doorway to something buried deep below, something that had been waiting, undisturbed, until now. Her breath caught in her throat as she spotted something at the edge of the clearing, a small, weathered stone, half buried in the soil. She knelt beside it, brushing away the dirt with trembling hands. The stone was smooth and cold to the touch, its surface marred by age and weather. As she cleared away the dirt, she uncovered faint, barely legible carvings, symbols, etched into the stone with a precision that seemed out of place in the wild, untamed woods. The symbols were familiar, similar to the ones she had seen carved into the walls of the basement. They spiraled across the surface of the stone in a strange, unsettling pattern, like the tendrils of some unseen force reaching out from beneath the earth. Emily stood, stepping back from the stone. The symbols seemed to pulse with a life of their own, though it was just a trick of her mind, she told herself. But the feeling remained. Something was stirring beneath the earth, something that should have been left undisturbed. The unmarked grave was not simply a resting place. It was a threshold, a place where the living and the dead converged, where whatever had been buried here waited to rise. The mist thickened, swirling around her as the air grew colder. The woods seemed to shift, the trees bending and creaking as though in response to the disturbance she had uncovered. She could feel the weight of the ground beneath her, heavy and oppressive, as if the earth itself resented her intrusion. Emily turned and hurried back toward the manor, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel something behind her, just beyond the edge of the mist, watching her retreat. The woods were not empty. They never had been. Something ancient lurked within them, something tied to the house, to the land, and to her family's cursed history. The unmarked grave was only the beginning. When she reached the manor's front door, she felt a strange sense of relief, as though the house itself provided some form of protection from whatever lay beyond its walls. But as she stepped inside, the oppressive silence returned, enveloping her like a shroud. The air inside the house was thick and cold, the weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. Emily glanced back at the journal in her hand, her fingers tracing the worn cover. The earth outside had stirred, and the house knew it. There was no escaping the connection between the two, the house, the grave, and whatever dark force bound them together. The silence inside Ravenshade Manor was no longer passive. It had become something far more dangerous, alive, waiting, just as the earth beneath her feet had been. Chapter 4. Whispers in the Attic. The day wore on, but the sun offered little comfort as it hung low in the sky, its light muted by thick clouds that seemed to choke the air. Inside Ravenshade Manor, Emily paced restlessly, her mind tethered to the journal, to the grave, and to the house that felt more and more like a living thing. Its very walls watching, its silence thick with intent. The oppressive stillness had returned, but now it felt like something more. It was no longer the quiet of abandonment, but the quiet of anticipation. She had spent hours poring over the journal, searching for any clue that could explain what she had uncovered in the woods. Her great-aunt Victoria had written cryptically, as if afraid to fully reveal what she had discovered. Yet every line hinted at something far darker than a mere haunting. The words, "beneath the roots," and "the earth calls," echoed in Emily's mind, repeating over and over like a mantra. The house, too, seemed to be hiding something. Emily had explored nearly every room, but the attic had remained locked. The old iron key, tarnished with age, had been left hanging on a rusted nail in the hallway, its purpose long forgotten. Until now, Emily's hand closed around the cold metal, the weight of it heavier than she expected, as if it had been waiting for her all along. She knew she had to go up there. The stairs leading to the attic were narrow and steep, barely wide enough to accommodate her. The air grew colder with each step, and the ceiling above seemed to close in, pressing down as if trying to squeeze her out. The light from the window at the end of the hallway dimmed as she ascended, the shadows growing longer and darker. A sense of dread settled over her, thick and palpable, but she couldn't stop now. Whatever secrets the attic held, she needed to uncover them. At the top of the stairs, the attic door loomed before her, its surface weathered and cracked. The key slid easily into the lock, and with a soft click, the door swung open. A rush of cold, stale air greeted her, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. The space beyond was vast, stretching into the dim recesses of the manor's upper reaches, where the roof sloped low and shadows clung to every corner. Emily stepped inside, her footfalls muted by the thick layer of dust that coated the floor. The attic felt like a forgotten world, untouched by time, filled with the discarded remnants of the house's long history. Old furniture, draped in sheets, stood like ghosts in the half-light, their shapes distorted and strange. Boxes and trunks lined the walls, their contents long forgotten, while cobwebs hung like curtains, swaying slightly in the still air. The attic had its own atmosphere, different from the rest of the house. It was colder here, the chill sinking deep into her bones. The silence was heavier too, as though the air itself had grown thick and sluggish. Yet there was something else, something barely perceptible, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. It wasn't quite a whisper, more like the echo of one, a distant murmur that seemed to drift through the shadows. Emily's flashlight cast long, uneven beams across the cluttered room, illuminating broken furniture and piles of forgotten belongings. But her eyes were drawn to the far end of the attic, where the light didn't reach. Something about the darkness there felt deeper, more oppressive, as if it concealed something waiting just beyond her sight. She moved carefully, her footsteps stirring up the dust and swirling clouds. The temperature dropped as she neared the far end of the attic, the air growing thicker, almost stifling. The murmur became more pronounced, the sound weaving through the silence like a faint melody, just out of reach. It wasn't a voice exactly, but it carried the weight of something old, something that had been waiting in the dark for far too long. The beam of her flashlight wavered as she approached the far wall, where a large wooden trunk sat, its surface covered in dust and cobwebs. It was the only object that wasn't draped in a sheet, and it stood apart from the rest of the attic's clutter, as if it had been deliberately placed there, waiting for someone to find it. Emily knelt beside the trunk, her fingers brushing against the cold, splintered wood. The lock had long since rusted away, leaving the lid slightly ajar. She hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest, before lifting the lid. Inside, the trunk was filled with old papers and photographs, their edges curled and yellowed with age. Emily sifted through them, her hands trembling slightly. The photographs were faded, but she could make out the figures, her ancestors, standing in front of the manor in various stages of its history. There was her great-aunt Victoria, her face stern and distant, standing beside a younger Emily's father. But there were others too, people she didn't recognize, their faces blurred, almost as if the photograph had deliberately obscured them. At the bottom of the trunk lay a bundle of old letters, tied together with a piece of frayed ribbon. The letters were addressed to Victoria, but the handwriting was unfamiliar, sharp, angular, and hurried. Emily unfolded the top letter, her eyes scanning the page. The letter spoke of a discovery, a hidden room beneath the manor, sealed away for centuries, accessible only through the basement. It detailed an excavation, an attempt to uncover something buried deep beneath the house, something that had been hidden by previous generations of the family. The tone of the letter was urgent, frantic even, warning Victoria to leave the house, to abandon her search before it was too late. The final line was underlined, the ink darker than the rest. It was never meant to be disturbed. Emily's blood ran cold as she read the words. The grave in the woods, the symbols in the basement, the strange sounds that seemed to echo through the house. It all pointed to something ancient, something that had been buried and sealed away for a reason. But her great-aunt hadn't listened. Had she? Victoria had stayed, and whatever she had found had consumed her. As Emily placed the letter back in the trunk, she noticed something else, something hidden beneath the pile of papers. She reached down and pulled out a small, wooden box, its surface smooth and polished. Unlike the rest of the attic's contents, there were no carvings or markings on the box, nothing to indicate its purpose. But it felt heavy, as if it contained something of great importance. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside was an object wrapped in dark, silken cloth. She carefully unfolded the fabric, revealing a small, intricately carved wooden totem. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before, its design ancient and otherworldly. The totem was carved in the shape of a twisted, distorted figure, its features barely recognizable as human. The eyes were hollow, the mouth open in a silent scream, and its body was contorted in an unnatural pose. As soon as Emily touched the totem, a wave of cold swept through the attic, and the faint murmur in the air grew louder, more distinct. The sound wasn't coming from the house. It was coming from the totem itself, as though it carried the echoes of whatever it represented. The air around her seemed to vibrate with energy, the shadows shifting and flickering at the edge of her vision. Suddenly, the attic felt smaller, the walls closing in around her. The darkness in the far corners deepened, and the weight of the silence pressed against her, almost suffocating. She could feel it now, the presence that had been lurking in the house since her arrival. It wasn't just the house itself, it was something older, something tied to the land and to the family's history. Emily carefully wrapped the totem back in the cloth and placed it inside the wooden box. The weight of the discovery hung over her like a storm cloud, dark and oppressive. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she had uncovered, it was connected to the grave, to the earth, and to the ancient forces that had been awakened. As she stood to leave the attic, the temperature plummeted, and the whispering grew louder, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. The air seemed to hum with energy, and the walls groaned under the weight of the house's secrets. Emily's heart raced as she hurried down the stairs, her footsteps echoing through the silence. When she reached the bottom, she glanced back at the attic door. It stood open, dark and foreboding, as though it were watching her retreat. The manor was awake now, and the silence that had once been passive was now an active force, pressing in on her, surrounding her. The totem, the journal, the grave. Everything was connected, woven together by a dark, ancient force that had been waiting for centuries. And now, it was stirring. As Emily moved through the hallway, she could feel it, the weight of something unseen watching her every step. The house wasn't just alive. It was listening, waiting, and soon, it would make its move. Chapter 5. The Weight of Shadows. Nightfall descended over Ravenshade Manor like a thick, suffocating blanket, wrapping the house in a darkness that felt deeper than the mere absence of light. The sky outside was shrouded in thick, black clouds, blotting out the moon and stars. In the absolute silence that followed the setting of the sun, the manor felt more alive than ever. Its walls seemed to hum with energy, and the air grew heavier, thick with unseen tension. Emily stood in the middle of the hallway, the wooden box containing the strange totem still clutched in her hands. The darkness pressed in on her from all sides, the house's sprawling interior seeming to expand, its corridors lengthening into black voids. Every shadow felt deliberate, placed with intention, as if the house itself was guiding her, pushing her towards something she could not yet see. She hadn't been able to shake the feeling of the attic. Even now, the image of the carved totem lingered in her mind, the hollow eyes staring out from its twisted face, silently screaming. It was more than a mere object. There was something alive within it, something ancient and powerful. The moment she had touched it, the house had responded. The air had thickened, the shadows had grown darker, and the faint murmur she had heard in the attic had followed her down into the heart of the manor. Emily's fingers tightened around the box as she made her way to the drawing room. The large, dust-covered windows looked out onto the garden, now barely visible through the swirling mist that clung to the earth. The world outside seemed as distant as it had that morning, unreachable, as though the house had isolated itself, cutting her off from everything beyond its walls. The fire had long since died in the hearth, leaving only the cold ashes of wood that had once burned brightly. The room felt colder now, the temperature dropping with every passing minute. Emily could feel the chill creeping into her bones, but it was more than the physical cold. There was a presence in the house, something watching her, waiting for her next move. She placed the wooden box on the table, its weight seeming far greater than it had been when she had found it. The dark, polished surface gleamed faintly in the dim light, the intricate carving on the totem barely visible beneath the silken cloth. Emily hesitated for a moment before opening the box again. The sight of the totem sent a shiver down her spine, its grotesque form seeming almost to shift in the flickering candlelight. The journal sat beside the box, open to the final entries written by her great-aunt Victoria. The words were frantic, scrawled with a trembling hand, detailing her descent into madness as she had uncovered the same forces that now seemed to be closing in on Emily. Victoria had written of the totem, of the grave in the woods, and of something far older than the house itself, something buried deep beneath the land, something that should have been left undisturbed. Emily flipped through the journal, her eyes scanning the pages for anything that might help her understand what she had unleashed. The entries became more fragmented, more chaotic, as Victoria's sanity had deteriorated. The final pages were filled with cryptic warnings, repeated over and over in the same desperate hand. "It is waking. It is coming for me." The words sent a chill down Emily's spine. She could feel it now, the presence that had consumed her great-aunt, the same force that had been waiting, dormant, for generations. The manor wasn't just haunted. It was a vessel, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin, where ancient forces could slip through and take hold. And now, whatever had been buried beneath the earth, beneath the roots of the trees, was beginning to stir. Emily's pulse quickened as she glanced toward the windows. The mist outside had thickened, swirling in strange, unnatural patterns. The trees beyond the garden were barely visible, their twisted branches reaching out like claws. The night was unnaturally still, devoid of the usual sounds of rustling leaves or distant animals. It was as if the world outside had gone silent, waiting, just as the house was. Her gaze shifted back to the totem, still wrapped in its dark cloth. It was an object of power. She knew that now. But it wasn't just any power. It was something ancient, something primal. The totem had been placed in the attic for a reason, sealed away in a forgotten corner of the house, far from prying eyes. But now it had been found, and whatever had been locked away with it was awakening. The feeling of being watched had intensified, and Emily could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, the presence in the house growing stronger with each passing moment. She glanced toward the darkened corners of the room, half expecting to see something move within the shadows. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence, broken by the occasional creak of the old wooden beams as the house settled into the night. Emily stood, the journal slipping from her hands as she moved toward the windows. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, staring out into the misty darkness. The woods seemed to pulse with life, the trees swaying ever so slightly, even though there was no wind. The earth beneath the house felt alive, as if it were breathing, moving beneath her feet. She had to go back to the basement. Everything pointed there: the journal, the totem, and the strange carvings she had seen on the walls. Whatever had been buried beneath the manor, whatever dark force her great-aunt had uncovered, it had to be connected to the basement. The floor groaned beneath her as she crossed the hallway, the darkness swallowing her as she descended the staircase toward the lower levels of the house. The air grew colder as she approached the basement door, the familiar sense of dread rising in her chest. The basement had always felt wrong, even before she had discovered the strange symbols carved into the walls. It was a place of darkness, where the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest. The door creaked open, revealing the narrow staircase that led into the depths of the house. Emily's flashlight flickered, the beam casting long, jagged shadows across the stone walls. The air was damp and musty, the cold seeping into her skin as she descended into the darkness. The basement was just as she remembered it, silent, still, and filled with the same sense of foreboding that had clung to her ever since her first visit. The stone walls were slick with moisture, and the faint scent of earth filled the air. The symbols carved into the walls seemed to shift in the flickering light, their meaning elusive, but the sense of malevolence they carried was undeniable. Emily approached the far wall, where the largest of the symbols had been etched deep into the stone. Her hand brushed against the cold surface, her fingers tracing the strange, spiraling patterns. The stone felt different now, softer, almost as if it were pulsing beneath her touch, like the slow beat of a heart buried deep within the earth. Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled, a faint vibration running through the stone floor. Emily froze, her breath catching in her throat. The sensation was subtle at first, but it grew stronger with each passing second. It wasn't just the earth that was moving. It was something beneath it, something stirring. The vibration intensified, and the sound of shifting earth echoed through the basement. The walls seemed to groan, the stone creaking under the pressure of something ancient and powerful. The air grew thick with dust as the vibration reached its peak, the very ground beneath her feet shaking. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the tremor stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, the air heavy with anticipation. Emily stood frozen in place, her hands still pressed against the stone wall. She could feel it now, the presence that had been lurking beneath the earth, the force that had been waiting for centuries to awaken. It was here, just beneath the surface, and it was no longer dormant. The faint whispering she had heard in the attic returned, louder now, more insistent. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it carried with it the weight of something far older than the house, older than the land itself. The basement walls seemed to close in around her, the darkness thickening, pressing down on her from all sides. Emily backed away from the wall, her pulse racing. She could feel it now, the presence growing stronger, feeding on the fear that had taken root in her chest. The house was no longer just a vessel. It was a conduit, a place where the boundary between worlds was thin, where something dark and ancient could slip through. As she turned to leave the basement, the whispering grew louder, filling the air with a low, droning hum. The stone walls seemed to shift, the symbols carved into them glowing faintly in the darkness. The presence was awake now, and it was watching her. Emily fled up the stairs, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the narrow passageway. The house seemed to shift around her, the air growing colder as the darkness deepened. When she reached the top of the stairs, She slammed the basement door shut behind her, her heart pounding in her chest. The silence in the house was absolute, oppressive. The shadows seemed to thicken, creeping closer, as if the house itself were closing in on her. The totem, still wrapped in its cloth, sat waiting in the drawing room, its presence a reminder of the ancient power that had been awakened. And as Emily stood in the middle of the hallway, the weight of the house pressing down on her, she realized that the darkness wasn't just in the basement. It was everywhere, woven into the very fabric of the manor itself. It was coming for her, just as it had come for her great-aunt Victoria, and there was no escape. Chapter 6. Beneath the Earth. The oppressive silence that clung to Ravenshade Manor grew even thicker, pressing down on Emily like a physical weight as she stood frozen in the hallway. Her breath came in shallow gasps, the cold air biting at her lungs. Every creak, every groan of the old house felt purposeful, as though the very walls were trying to communicate with her, warning her, urging her to leave. But the house was alive now, and there would be no escape from whatever it was hiding deep within. Emily's gaze flickered to the totem in the drawing room, still wrapped in its silken cloth, the small wooden box that held it now sitting on the table. The darkness in the room seemed to swirl around it, like tendrils of shadow reaching out, grasping at the edges of her vision. The totem was a key to something far older and darker than the house itself, something that had been buried deep beneath the earth, locked away for a reason. A sudden chill raced down her spine as she remembered the journal entries, her great-aunt Victoria's frantic writings about the hidden room beneath the manor, sealed away long ago. Emily's pulse quickened. The basement had only been the beginning. There was more, something deeper, something that Victoria had uncovered but had not fully understood. And now, Emily had to finish what her great-aunt had started, whether she wanted to or not. The weight of the house settled over her like a shroud as she crossed the room and picked up the wooden box. The carved totem, grotesque and twisted, felt heavier in her hands, as though it were pulling her down, anchoring her to the dark force that permeated the manor. She couldn't shake the feeling that the totem had a mind of its own, that it had been waiting for her to find it, to take it to the place where it truly belonged. Emily glanced at the basement door, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that whatever she was searching for was down there, in the depths of the house, buried beneath layers of stone and earth. The symbols etched into the walls, the strange vibrations she had felt earlier, they were all signs, clues leading her to the hidden chamber her great-aunt had written about. The only question was, what lay beneath? The flashlight in her hand flickered as she descended the stairs to the basement once more. The air grew colder with each step, thick with moisture and the faint scent of decay. The narrow passage felt even smaller this time, the stone walls closing in around her, suffocating her with their presence. It wasn't just the physical space. It was the weight of centuries of secrets pressing down on her, the knowledge that she was walking into something far more dangerous than she could possibly understand. The basement was exactly as she had left it, the symbols on the walls still glowing faintly in the darkness, their meaning elusive but their intent clear. Something had been locked away here, something that should never have been disturbed. Emily's eyes scanned the stone walls, her mind racing. The journal had spoken of a hidden room, a chamber that had been sealed off long ago. But where? The basement was small, a single narrow corridor with no visible doors, no indication that there was anything more. But Emily knew there was more. She could feel it. The vibrations in the earth beneath her feet had grown stronger, more pronounced, as though the ground itself was stirring, waking up. The very air seemed to hum with energy, a low, droning sound that reverberated through her bones. She moved toward the far end of the basement, her flashlight casting long shadows across the stone floor. Her fingers brushed against the cold, damp walls as she searched for any sign of a hidden passage, any clue that might lead her deeper into the house's buried secrets. The stone felt alive beneath her touch, vibrating slightly, pulsing with a life of its own. As she reached the end of the corridor, she noticed something strange. One of the stones near the floor was different from the others. It was slightly darker, smoother, as though it had been worn down by years of touch. Emily knelt down, her fingers trembling as she pressed against the stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a faint grinding sound, the stone shifted, revealing a small, hidden mechanism embedded in the wall. Her heart raced as she pressed the mechanism. The wall in front of her groaned, the stone grinding against stone as a narrow section of the wall slid aside, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel leading downward. The air that rushed out from the tunnel was colder than anything she had felt before, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and rot, as though it had been sealed for centuries. Emily's hand tightened around the flashlight as she stepped into the tunnel. The passage was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for her to fit through. The stone walls were rough and uneven, slick with moisture, and the ground beneath her feet was soft, almost spongy, as though she were walking on layers of decayed matter. The air was thick and heavy, each breath a struggle against the cold dampness that clung to her skin. The tunnel descended deeper into the earth, winding in a slow, spiraling path. The further she went, the stronger the vibration beneath her feet became, the very ground seeming to tremble with anticipation. The flashlight flickered, casting brief flashes of light across the stone walls, revealing strange markings, symbols similar to those she had seen in the basement, but more intricate, more sinister. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, a cavernous space carved deep into the earth. The walls of the chamber were covered in ancient carvings, spiraling patterns that twisted and turned in on themselves, drawing the eye deeper into their intricate design. At the center of the room stood a stone altar, weathered and worn with age, its surface covered in dark stains that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she approached the altar. The air in the chamber was thick with the scent of decay, and the faint, rhythmic vibration she had felt in the tunnel was stronger here, pulsing through the ground in time with her racing heart. The walls of the chamber seemed to hum with energy, the symbols carved into the stone glowing faintly in the darkness, as though they were alive, reacting to her presence. On the altar lay a large, rectangular stone slab, partially covered by crumbling remnants of cloth and dust. Emily's fingers trembled as she brushed away the debris, revealing more intricate carvings etched into the stone surface. The patterns were strange, almost hypnotic, and as she stared at them, a sense of overwhelming dread settled over her, as though the very act of looking at the altar was a violation. The totem in her hand felt heavier than ever, its twisted, grotesque form pulling her toward the altar. She knew, without understanding why, that this was where it belonged. The journal had spoken of a ritual, of an ancient force that had been locked away beneath the manor, and the totem was the key. But what would happen if she placed it on the altar? What had her great-aunt discovered all those years ago? Victoria's warnings echoed in her mind, her frantic words scrawled across the pages of the journal. It was never meant to be disturbed. Emily's heart raced as she stood before the altar, the totem clutched in her trembling hands. The ground beneath her feet pulsed with a steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of something buried deep within the earth, something that had been waiting for centuries to be awakened. The weight of the darkness pressed down on her, the walls of the chamber seeming to close in around her, the air thick with the scent of decay. With a deep breath, Emily placed the totem on the altar. The moment the totem touched the stone, the air in the chamber shifted. A low, guttural sound reverberated through the walls, a deep, primal noise that seemed to come from the very earth itself. The ground trembled violently beneath her feet, the vibration building to a deafening roar as the symbols on the walls flared to life, glowing with a sickly, unnatural light. The altar began to shake, the stone slab groaning under the pressure of some unseen force. The air grew colder, the temperature plummeting as a freezing wind rushed through the chamber, howling like the wail of 1,000 lost souls. The light from Emily's flashlight flickered and died, plunging the room into total darkness. And then, from the depths of the earth, came the sound of something moving. It was slow at first, a faint rustling, like the shifting of dirt and stone. But it grew louder, more insistent, as though something massive was clawing its way upward, toward the surface. The ground shook violently, cracks spidering across the floor of the chamber, as if the earth itself were splitting apart. Emily's heart raced as she backed away from the altar, the sound of the earth moving growing louder, more frenzied. Whatever was buried beneath the manor, It was coming. The totem had been the key, the final piece in a ritual that had been set in motion centuries ago. And now the force that had been locked away for so long was about to be released. The chamber was filled with a deafening roar as the ground split open, and from the darkness below, something began to rise. Emily ran, the sound of the earth collapsing behind her, the walls of the chamber crumbling as the ancient force surged upward. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The only thing that mattered now was getting out of the house before it was too late. As she fled through the tunnel, the vibration beneath her feet grew more intense, the very ground shaking with the force of whatever had been unleashed. The air was thick with dust and debris, the sound of the house collapsing around her as the ancient force tore its way to the surface. But as Emily reached the top of the stairs and burst into the hallway, she realized that the house had changed. The walls were shifting, the shadows writhing like living things, the very structure of the manor warping and twisting around her. The ancient force had awakened, and there was no escaping it now. Chapter 7. The Shattered Veil. The very air of Ravenshade Manor felt different now, as if the house itself had transformed into something else, something dark and twisted. Emily stumbled back into the hallway, her breath coming in ragged gasps, heart pounding in rhythm with the tremors that coursed through the ground. The walls seemed to pulse with life, shadows slithering and flickering as if they were animated by an unseen force. Every instinct screamed at her to escape, to flee from the house that had become a living nightmare. The vibrations beneath her feet intensified, a deep, resonating pulse that echoed the frantic beating of her heart. She turned, eyes wide with terror, as she rushed back toward the drawing room, where the totem had been placed. The wooden box lay abandoned on the table, the cloth stripped away, leaving the totem exposed, its grotesque face twisted in a grotesque, eternal grin. Emily could feel the house breathing, a slow and heavy inhalation that reverberated through the very floorboards. The shadows lengthened and stretched, swirling around her as she crossed the threshold into the drawing room. It was as if the darkness itself had come alive, encroaching upon her with every step. The room had grown colder, the air thick with the remnants of something ancient and malevolent. She hesitated for a moment, casting a glance back toward the entrance to the hallway, where shadows writhed in the corners of her vision. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shapes that danced on the walls, shifting and contorting as though they were alive. She felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, a primal instinct warning her that something was watching, lurking just beyond her line of sight. With no other option, Emily made her way toward the fireplace, the remnants of the cold ashes casting an even darker hue upon the room. She knelt down, searching for anything that might aid her escape. The fire had long since died, but the hearth was a sanctuary from the shadows creeping closer, threatening to engulf her. In her frantic search, her fingers brushed against something cold and hard, an old iron poker, long forgotten. It felt reassuring in her grip, its weight grounding her in the chaos that surrounded her. The remnants of the past felt both familiar and foreign, like ghosts whispering from the corners of her mind, urging her to act, to fight against the encroaching darkness. But the shadows grew bolder, and Emily could feel them closing in around her. It was no longer just the house that felt alive. It was something else, something that had been awakened beneath the ground. The air was thickening with a palpable tension, as if the house were holding its breath, waiting for her next move. She turned back toward the hallway, her heart racing, the iron poker clutched tightly in her hand. As she stepped into the corridor, the walls shifted, the shadows swirling like a storm of darkness, attempting to draw her back into their depths. Emily felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her, the history of the manor clawing at her with ghostly fingers. The wooden floorboards creaked underfoot, but she pressed onward, determination fueling her every step. She could sense it now, a force rising within the house, beckoning her toward the source of its power. It was a dark and ancient energy, something that had lain dormant for far too long and was now threatening to break free. As she moved deeper into the house, the corridors twisted and turned, elongating into impossible shapes. The shadows around her became thicker, darker, each corner hiding secrets that should never be uncovered. It felt as if the house were shifting, changing shape to contain her, to trap her within its dark embrace. Emily's thoughts raced as she navigated the maze of shadows. She had to find a way to reverse whatever had been unleashed, to seal the darkness that threatened to consume everything. But how? The journal had provided only fragments of knowledge, cryptic warnings that now seemed so far removed from the reality she faced. She paused in front of a large, ornate mirror that hung on the wall, its surface clouded with dust and age. In its reflection, she caught a glimpse of herself, wide-eyed, hair disheveled, an iron poker gripped tightly in her hand. But there was something else in the mirror, something lurking behind her, obscured by shadows. The chill of dread washed over her, but she couldn't look away. Whatever it was, it felt vast and ancient, an entity that had been waiting, watching. The mirror rippled, the surface distorting as if it were water, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the outline of a figure, a dark silhouette that reached out toward her. With a gasp, Emily turned, swinging the poker wildly at the air behind her. The hallway was empty, but the oppressive presence loomed larger, the air thickening with every passing second. The vibrations in the floor became a low, rhythmic thrum, an echoing heartbeat that filled the silence. She knew she couldn't linger here, not in this darkness that felt as though it were pulling her down into an abyss. Emily pressed on, her feet moving faster as she raced toward the kitchen, a space she remembered as once warm and inviting, now tainted by shadows. The wooden door creaked open as she pushed through, the cold air washing over her like a wave. The kitchen was bathed in darkness, the corners filled with looming shadows that seemed to pulse with life. The large, stone fireplace loomed at the far end of the kitchen, the soot-stained bricks reminiscent of a time when it had been a gathering place for laughter and warmth. But now, it felt hollow, a reminder of everything that had been lost. Emily could feel the heaviness in the air as she approached it, the shadows whispering secrets she could not understand. Her gaze darted around the kitchen, searching for something, anything, that might help her understand the force she was facing. On the table, she spotted the remnants of an old cookbook, its pages yellowed with age. She moved closer, the dim light revealing faded recipes and notes scrawled in the margins. But what caught her attention was a peculiar drawing near the back. The illustration depicted a ritual, a complex arrangement of symbols and the totem, surrounded by candles and offerings. Beneath the drawing, words were written in an elegant, flowing script. To seal the darkness, one must invoke the light. The message sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. It was an instruction, a hint at how to fight back against the malevolent force that was growing stronger by the moment. With newfound determination, Emily searched the kitchen for candles. She found a small drawer filled with remnants of an old life, mismatched candle holders, a box of matches, and a few stray candles. She hurriedly gathered them, her hands shaking as she set to work, arranging the candles in a circle on the kitchen table. Once the candles were positioned, she struck a match and lit the first one. The flame flickered to life, casting a warm glow that cut through the darkness, sending the shadows retreating momentarily. Emily's heart raced as she lit each subsequent candle, the circle of light expanding, pushing back against the oppressive gloom that threatened to engulf her. As she finished lighting the last candle, the shadows at the edges of the room seemed to writhe, angry at the intrusion of light. The vibrations beneath her feet pulsed violently, as if the house were reacting to her defiance. The temperature dropped suddenly, the air feeling electric with energy. She closed her eyes, focusing on the drawing she had seen in the cookbook, the symbols she had studied. She had to invoke the light, to call upon whatever forces still lingered in this house, whatever remnants of warmth and hope could stand against the encroaching darkness. She thought of her great-aunt Victoria, of the warnings she had written, and of the light that had once filled this home. As she stood within the circle of flickering flames, Emily concentrated on the warmth emanating from the candles, letting it fill her. She could feel the energy coalescing around her, a powerful force pushing back against the darkness. With every breath, she visualized the shadows receding, the tendrils of night unraveling, driven away by the light. But just as she felt a flicker of hope, the shadows surged forward again, rushing toward her like a wave. The candles flickered violently, their flames threatening to extinguish under the onslaught. Emily's heart raced as the darkness enveloped her, pressing against her from all sides, threatening to snuff out the light. In that moment of despair, she remembered the totem, the ancient power that had been awakened. It was not just a key, it was a conduit, a connection to the forces that dwelled within the earth. If she could harness its energy, perhaps she could summon the light more effectively. With trembling hands, Emily reached for the totem, its grotesque form cold against her palm. The moment she held it, she felt a surge of energy coursing through her, as if the very essence of the house was being channeled through the object. She could feel the vibrations intensifying, the shadows recoiling at the touch of the totem. With renewed strength, she placed the totem at the center of the circle of candles, allowing its energy to mingle with the flames. The air crackled with electricity, the shadows screeching as they fought against the light. The flames flared higher, illuminating the kitchen with a fierce glow that pushed back the darkness, illuminating the grotesque carvings that adorned the walls. Emily focused on the energy coursing through her, visualizing the light expanding, pushing against the shadows with every heartbeat. She concentrated on the symbols in the cookbook, drawing upon the ancient knowledge that had been passed down through generations. The kitchen filled with a blinding radiance, the shadows shrieking in protest as they were forced back against the walls. In a final surge of power, Emily closed her eyes and summoned every ounce of light she could muster. The candles burned brighter, the flames roaring to life as the shadows writhed in agony, shrinking away from the light. She could feel the ancient force beneath the house responding to her call, the very earth vibrating in response. With one last breath, she opened her eyes and released the energy, sending a wave of light cascading outward, flooding the room. The shadows screamed, their forms dissipating like smoke, banished by the sheer force of illumination. But the battle was far from over. As the last of the darkness retreated, Emily could sense the powerful presence still lingering beneath the house, trapped but not defeated. The air trembled with anticipation, the vibrations resonating through her bones. The ancient force had been weakened, but it was still there, lurking just beyond her reach. The light had momentarily saved her, but she knew she had to find a way to seal the darkness once and for all. As the candles flickered, she vowed to uncover the truth, to finish what her great-aunt had started. The manor still held its secrets, and Emily was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. With the totem in hand and the light still glowing brightly, she steeled herself for what lay ahead. The shadows would not rest, and neither would she. The shattered veil between the worlds had revealed itself, and Emily was ready to face the darkness that awaited her. Chapter 8: The Echoes of Time. Emily stood in the remnants of the kitchen, the flickering candles casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The air was charged with the energy of the confrontation she had just faced, but it was also tinged with a lingering sense of foreboding. The shadows had retreated for now, but their essence still hung heavy in the air, a reminder of the dark force that lay beneath Ravenshade Manor. Taking a deep breath, she turned her attention back to the totem, still warm in her hands. Its grotesque face seemed to pulse with a faint glow, as if resonating with the remnants of the light she had summoned. She could feel its power thrumming beneath her fingertips, a connection to something much larger than herself, something ancient and deeply rooted in the history of the manor. With renewed determination, Emily knew she had to explore deeper into the house. The knowledge buried within the walls was waiting to be unearthed, and perhaps it would provide the answers she desperately sought. She carefully placed the totem back on the table, its grotesque form a stark contrast against the soft light of the candles. As she turned away, a chill swept through the room, causing her to shiver involuntarily. The hallway beckoned her once more, the shadows having receded but still whispering secrets in the corners of her mind. As she stepped back into the corridor, the dim light of the candles illuminated the intricate woodwork and faded wallpaper that lined the walls. Each step she took echoed softly, the sound merging with the distant vibrations that pulsed beneath the floor, a reminder of the ancient force still waiting to be confronted. Emily made her way toward the staircase, her heart pounding in her chest. She ascended slowly, the wooden steps creaking underfoot, each sound a reminder of the weight of history that surrounded her. As she reached the landing, she felt a strange compulsion to explore the study, the very room where her great-aunt had pored over ancient texts and manuscripts, searching for answers of her own. The door to the study loomed ahead, slightly ajar, as if inviting her inside. Emily pushed it open with a soft creak, revealing the dimly lit room filled with bookshelves that reached to the ceiling, lined with tomes bound in cracked leather and dust. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper, mingling with the faint aroma of lavender from the sachets her great-aunt had kept nearby. A large oak desk sat in the center of the room, strewn with papers, quills, and an inkwell that had long since dried up. Emily approached the desk, her eyes scanning the chaotic mess of notes and drawings scattered across the surface. It was a window into her great-aunt's mind, filled with thoughts and ideas that had danced across the pages like shadows seeking form. Among the papers, she noticed a particularly large, weathered sheet. As she carefully unfolded it, the image of the manor came into view, sketched in delicate lines that depicted not just the structure, but also the land surrounding it. Emily's heart raced as she traced the inked lines with her fingers. Alongside the drawing were annotations, notes in her great-aunt's elegant handwriting detailing the history of Ravenshade Manor, its connection to ancient rituals, and the strange occurrences that had plagued the family for generations. One note caught her attention, a reference to a hidden chamber beneath the house, a space where rituals had been performed to maintain the balance between light and dark. The mention of the chamber stirred something deep within her, an echo of the knowledge she had absorbed from the journal and the whispers of the house. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily delved deeper into the notes, piecing together fragments of her great-aunt's findings. It spoke of a powerful entity that had once been bound within the earth, a force that, if unleashed, could consume not just the manor but the very land itself. The ritual her great-aunt had been preparing was meant to contain it, to keep the darkness at bay, but it appeared she had never completed it. Suddenly, the ground beneath her shifted, a low rumble echoing through the walls of the study. The vibrations intensified, sending a shiver down her spine. Emily glanced up from the papers, her breath hitching in her throat. It felt as if the house were alive, as if it were responding to her search, urging her to uncover the secrets it held. Heart racing, she searched the room for any indication of the hidden chamber mentioned in the notes. The shelves stood tall, filled with books that seemed to whisper as she brushed past them. Emily scanned the walls, looking for any signs that would lead her to the entrance. She had to find that chamber. It was her only chance to fully understand the darkness that loomed over Ravenshade Manor. Her fingers traced along the edge of the bookshelf, feeling for any irregularities in the wood. As she moved, she felt a slight draft against her skin, cool and inviting. The sensation pulled her toward a section of the wall where the shadows pooled thicker than elsewhere, as if the darkness were gathering in anticipation. Emily pressed her palm against the wall, feeling the coolness seep through her skin. She could sense a pulse, a rhythm that matched the vibrations beneath her feet. Drawing a deep breath, she pushed against the wall with all her strength, her heart pounding as the wood creaked in protest. With a sudden lurch, a section of the wall shifted, revealing a narrow passage that seemed to disappear into the depths of the manor. The dark entrance beckoned, a void against the backdrop of the study. She felt a mix of dread and exhilaration. This was the path to the hidden chamber, the place where the ancient rituals had taken place. Without hesitating, Emily stepped into the passageway, the air growing colder with each step she took. The narrow corridor was dimly lit, the walls lined with rough stone that felt damp and unwelcoming. As she ventured deeper, the vibrations beneath her feet intensified, resonating through the very walls of the manor. The passage twisted and turned, the darkness thickening around her like a suffocating blanket. She could hear her own heartbeat, echoing loudly in the silence, each pulse a reminder of her isolation. The shadows seemed to reach out, clawing at her resolve, but Emily pressed onward, the knowledge she had gathered pushing her forward. After what felt like an eternity, she emerged into a vast chamber, the air heavy with the weight of forgotten rituals and dark promises. The room was circular, its walls adorned with ancient symbols carved into the stone. At the center lay a large stone altar, worn smooth by the passage of time. The chamber felt alive, a reservoir of energy that pulsed in rhythm with the vibrations beneath her feet. Emily approached the altar, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. Upon its surface lay remnants of offerings, dried herbs, bones, and a single, blackened candle, all placed carefully as if awaiting the return of a long-lost ritual. It was here that her great-aunt had likely conducted her own attempts to keep the darkness contained. She felt drawn to the altar, the totem still clutched tightly in her hand. The moment she placed it upon the stone surface, a surge of energy rippled through the chamber. The ancient symbols on the walls began to glow faintly, pulsating with an otherworldly light that filled the room. Emily closed her eyes, letting the energy wash over her. She could feel the house responding to her presence, as if recognizing her as the rightful heir to this legacy. The vibrations beneath her feet became a symphony of power, echoing through the chamber and resonating with the very fabric of the manor. As the light intensified, the shadows that had lurked in the corners of the chamber began to writhe, flickering against the walls like restless spirits. She opened her eyes, feeling a deep connection to the space around her. This was not just a place of darkness. It was also a wellspring of light, a battleground where the two forces clashed for dominance. With the totem at the altar, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood now that she was not merely an intruder in this ancient realm. She was part of it. The weight of her great-aunt's legacy rested upon her shoulders, and she had the power to finish what had been started so long ago. She turned her gaze to the symbols etched into the stone, their meanings revealing themselves to her like fragments of a dream. They spoke of balance, of the delicate dance between light and dark that defined existence. To contain the darkness, she had to acknowledge it, to confront it with the light she had summoned. The chamber thrummed with anticipation as she began to gather the remnants of the offerings scattered across the altar. Emily carefully arranged them into a circle around the totem, the act feeling both instinctual and ritualistic. With each item she placed, she visualized the energies flowing through the room, merging with the totem's power. Once the circle was complete, she reached for the blackened candle, lighting it with the flame from one of the candles she had brought with her. As the flame flickered to life, a warmth spread through the chamber, the shadows recoiling momentarily as the light expanded. With each flicker of the candle, Emily felt the connection to her great-aunt strengthen. She visualized the strength of her lineage, the generations of women who had fought against the darkness, who had faced their fears and stood firm in the face of the unknown. As the candle burned, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to become a vessel for the energies around her. She envisioned the light expanding beyond the chamber, reaching out into the very foundations of the manor, binding the darkness that lurked below. In that moment, she understood her purpose. She was here to restore the balance, to bring harmony back to Ravenshade Manor. The shadows writhed violently, but Emily stood her ground, the warmth of the candle's flame surrounding her like a protective shield. The ancient forces clashed, a tumultuous battle between light and dark, but Emily's resolve remained steadfast. She would not be driven away. As the candle burned brightly, the symbols on the walls began to glow in response, illuminating the chamber in a radiant light. The shadows recoiled, their forms twisting and contorting as they fought against the surge of energy that threatened to consume them. Emily felt the power coursing through her, a tidal wave of light that surged forth from the altar, banishing the darkness inch by inch. In the throes of the battle, she remembered the faces of her ancestors, the sacrifices they had made, and the strength that flowed through her veins. With each breath, she drew upon that legacy, letting it fuel the fire within her. She was not alone. She was part of something greater, a lineage bound by purpose and courage. The chamber echoed with the clash of energies, the air thick with anticipation as the darkness writhed against the onslaught of light. Emily focused her energy, channeling it into the totem, urging it to resonate with the ancient forces that thrummed beneath the earth. With one final push, she unleashed a surge of light so powerful that it erupted from the altar, engulfing the chamber in a blinding radiance. The shadows screamed, their forms dissipating like mist in the sun, unable to withstand the brilliance of her resolve. As the light flooded the chamber, Emily felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. The battle was won, for now. The darkness had been contained, but she understood that it was a continuous fight. The shadows would always linger, waiting for the slightest crack to seep through, but she had found her strength. With the candle still burning brightly, she took a moment to breathe, feeling the energy of the chamber settle around her. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but she knew this was only the beginning. There was still much to uncover, and the hidden truths of Ravenshade Manor awaited her discovery. As the last of the shadows retreated into the corners, Emily gathered the remnants of her Greytant's offerings, placing them carefully back on the altar. Each item held a story, a connection to the past that would guide her in the days to come. The house was alive, and she was its guardian, determined to protect its secrets and ensure that the darkness would never rise again. Chapter 9. The Beneath Unveiled. With the shadows receding into the depths of the chamber, Emily felt a newfound sense of purpose surge within her. The light had shown her the path forward, illuminating the secrets of Ravenshade Manor that lay hidden beneath the surface. The battle with the darkness had revealed the strength of her lineage, yet she knew there was still much work to be done. The ancient force that had been kept at bay could not be ignored, and the time had come for her to uncover its true nature. Stepping away from the altar, she took a moment to collect herself. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows on the stone walls, creating an ethereal atmosphere that enveloped her. The air was thick with the remnants of the energy she had unleashed, pulsating like a heartbeat in the stillness of the chamber. With each beat, Emily felt the weight of her destiny pressing down upon her, urging her to delve deeper into the mysteries of the manor. Emily turned her attention back to the walls, the ancient symbols glowing faintly as if calling out to her. She approached them, tracing her fingers along the intricate carvings, feeling the vibrations resonate through her. Each symbol was a testament to the power contained within this space, a language of light and dark that spoke to her very soul. One particular symbol caught her eye, a spiral that seemed to twist inward, creating a portal of sorts. Emily felt a pull toward it, as if it were beckoning her to understand its significance. Closing her eyes, she focused her thoughts on the spiral, allowing herself to sink into the energy it emanated. As she did, the symbols around her began to swirl, transforming the chamber into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. Visions flashed before her eyes, fragments of memories and experiences tied to the manor and its history. She saw the faces of her ancestors, their expressions filled with determination and fear, each grappling with the darkness in their own way. The visions shifted, revealing moments of ritual and sacrifice, ancient ceremonies held in the chamber to maintain the balance. She witnessed the shadows, once held at bay, creeping into their lives, twisting their intentions, feeding on their fears. The cycle of light and dark had played out across generations, and now it was her turn to confront it. As the visions continued, Emily saw herself standing in this very chamber, holding the totem aloft as a radiant light enveloped her. The shadows writhed in agony, retreating before her, but they were not completely vanquished. They lingered, waiting for the right moment to resurface, to reclaim what had once been theirs. With a jolt, the visions faded, and Emily found herself back in the chamber, breathless and shaken. The reality of her situation pressed heavily upon her. The darkness was not just a physical entity. It was an echo of fear and despair that lived on in the hearts of those who had come before her. She had to confront this fear, to understand it fully, or risk allowing it to grow unchecked. Determined to face the depths of Ravenshade Manor, Emily turned away from the symbols and made her way to the altar. The flickering candle still burned brightly, its light illuminating the path forward. She gathered the remnants of the offerings, placing them back on the altar with reverence. Each item held a story, a connection to the past, and she felt a responsibility to honor that history. Once the altar was cleared, Emily turned her attention to the walls of the chamber. She scanned the surface for any hidden doors or passages that might lead her deeper into the manor's secrets. The dim light cast by the candle flickered against the stone, revealing subtle shifts in the texture of the walls. It was then she noticed a section that seemed out of place, a faint outline that hinted at an entrance concealed by time. Approaching the wall, She pressed her hands against the rough surface, feeling for a mechanism or a way to reveal what lay beyond. The stone felt cold against her skin, the vibrations beneath her feet growing stronger, resonating with her heartbeat. Emily focused her energy, channeling the light from the candle into her palms, allowing it to flow through her fingertips and into the wall. The moment she made contact, the stone began to shift. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, and with a sudden lurch, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a darkened passageway that extended into the depths of the manor. Emily hesitated for a brief moment, the unknown stretching out before her like a chasm filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered. With a deep breath, she stepped into the passage, the air growing colder as she descended further into the darkness. The walls were lined with rough-hewn stone, and Emily felt the vibrations intensify, echoing through her bones as if urging her onward. The flickering light of the candle illuminated the path ahead, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in anticipation. As she ventured deeper, the passage twisted and turned, leading her away from the chamber she had just left. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, an unsettling reminder of the darkness that lingered beneath the surface. Emily pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest, driven by an insatiable curiosity to uncover the truth. After what felt like an eternity, she reached a large cavernous space, the air shifting around her as if it were alive. The flickering candlelight illuminated the room, revealing a vast expanse filled with ancient markings carved into the stone floor. The symbols radiated with a faint luminescence, echoing the patterns she had seen in the chamber above. In the center of the cavern stood a massive stone circle, each segment etched with intricate designs that pulsed with energy. It was a summoning circle, Emily realized, a place where ancient rituals had been performed to commune with the forces that governed the balance between light and dark. The very air crackled with power, an unspoken energy that beckoned her closer. She approached the circle cautiously, the candlelight casting eerie shadows that danced around the edges. As she stepped into the circle, the markings flared to life, a brilliant light enveloping her as if acknowledging her presence. The warmth of the energy flowed through her, intertwining with her own, amplifying her connection to the manor and its ancient history. Emily closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into the energy of the circle. She could feel the echoes of rituals long past, the prayers and invocations that had been made in this very spot. Each symbol resonated with a story, a piece of the tapestry that wove together the lives of those who had come before her. She felt their strength, their hopes, and their fears, all converging in this moment. The shadows at the edges of the circle began to writhe, their forms coiling around the light as if seeking to reclaim their lost power. Emily opened her eyes, the candle flickering wildly as the darkness surged toward her. But she stood firm, the light within her flaring brighter in response to the encroaching shadows. As the darkness pressed closer, she concentrated, channeling her energy into the symbols beneath her feet. The markings flared with intensity, the ancient power igniting in a surge of light that illuminated the entire cavern. The shadows recoiled, their forms twisting in agony as they were pushed back by the force of her will. The light expanded, filling the cavern with a radiance that illuminated every corner, every crevice. Emily felt the connection to the past deepen, the voices of her ancestors resonating through her. They had fought this battle before, and now she was carrying the torch, igniting the light that had been dimmed for far too long. With each heartbeat, she felt the darkness wane, the shadows retreating to the edges of the circle, unable to withstand the purity of the light. Emily's heart surged with determination. She would not let the darkness reclaim its hold. She was here to break the cycle, to confront the fear that had plagued her family for generations. The symbols beneath her glowed brighter, intertwining with her energy, a brilliant fusion of light and shadow. Emily envisioned the darkness being banished from the manor, not through violence but through understanding. She envisioned the balance being restored, the harmony between light and dark allowing both to coexist without overpowering the other. As she concentrated, the shadows began to shift and warp, transforming into forms that were less monstrous and more sorrowful. Emily could see the essence of the darkness, the fear and despair that had taken root within it. She felt compassion surge within her, understanding that these shadows were not mere evil, but remnants of pain that had been left unhealed. Drawing upon her strength, she spoke to the shadows not with words, but with intent. She channeled her energy into the circle, sending waves of light that reached out to them. She could sense their hesitation, their uncertainty, and in that moment, she knew she had the power to heal rather than to destroy. The shadows hesitated, wavering between their instinct to flee and the pull of the light. Emily's heart raced as she focused on the remnants of pain within them, envisioning them being embraced by the warmth of her light. With each pulse of energy, she could feel the shadows responding, their forms softening, their fear dissipating. In a brilliant burst of light, the shadows began to dissolve, their essence intertwining with the radiance surrounding her. Emily watched in awe as the darkness transformed into a shimmering mist, the sorrow within it lifting as it merged with the light. The cavern filled with a harmonious glow, the energy intertwining like a dance of light and shadow, creating a balance that had been missing for so long. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her, the weight of generations of fear beginning to lift. She had not only faced the darkness, she had offered it a chance at redemption. As the light enveloped her, Emily understood that her journey was far from over. The darkness may have been transformed, but the history of Ravenshade Manor was rich with stories yet to be uncovered. She felt a deep connection to the manor and the forces that dwelled within it, and she knew that it was her calling to protect this legacy. With the shadows now mere whispers in the air, she turned to leave the circle, feeling the energy of the cavern settle around her. The flickering candle still burned brightly, a beacon of hope that had guided her through the darkness. She stepped back into the passage, the weight of her experience settling into her bones. As she ascended back to the chamber above, she felt the air change, the energy of Ravenshade Manor shifting in response to her actions. The darkness that had once loomed heavy over the house had been transformed, a new chapter beginning to unfold. Emily emerged into the chamber, the light illuminating her path, and in that moment, she understood the true power of balance. She was not merely a vessel of light. She was a guardian, destined to protect the secrets of the manor while fostering the harmony between light and dark. The shadows may have retreated, but they would always exist as part of the larger tapestry, and it was her duty to ensure they remained at peace. As she looked around the chamber, the flickering candle casting warm shadows on the stone walls, Emily felt a sense of hope blossoming within her. The past had shaped her, but the future was hers to mold. She took a deep breath, embracing the weight of her lineage, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Ravenshade Manor was alive, and she would continue to explore its depths, unraveling the mysteries that awaited her. Chapter 10. The Echoes of the Past. Emily stood at the threshold of the chamber, a sense of calm washing over her as the energy of the manor enveloped her like a warm embrace. The flickering candlelight danced along the walls, illuminating the intricate carvings that told the stories of her ancestors. Each symbol felt more vibrant, infused with a renewed vitality, a testament to the victory over darkness that she had just achieved. As she took a moment to breathe, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The shadows had transformed, but their essence still lingered in the air, a reminder of the balance that she must continue to uphold. She felt a deep connection to the manor, as if the very stones beneath her feet resonated with her heartbeat. With purpose in her step, Emily began to explore the chamber anew, her eyes scanning the surfaces for anything she might have missed before. The altar, now stripped of its offerings, felt like a focal point, a beacon that drew her attention. The symbols on its surface glowed faintly, pulsating in rhythm with the candle's flame, beckoning her to engage with the legacy left behind. Approaching the altar, Emily ran her fingers along its edge, tracing the intricate patterns etched into the stone. Each carving told a story, and she could feel the weight of their significance, a blend of reverence and history woven together. The markings seemed to resonate with her own experiences, and for a fleeting moment, she felt as though she was stepping into the memories of those who had come before her. Determined to delve deeper into the past, she closed her eyes and focused on the energy surrounding her. The air shimmered, and the world around her faded as she slipped into a trance, allowing herself to be carried away by the echoes of time. She envisioned the ritual that had once taken place in this very chamber, the flickering flames casting shadows on the faces of her ancestors. Visions flooded her mind, each fragment revealing moments from the manor's history. She saw her great-aunt, her expression solemn as she performed the ancient rites, her hands steady as she called upon the forces of light to keep the darkness at bay. The flicker of candles illuminated the room, their flames trembling under the weight of whispered prayers. Emily felt the weight of her ancestors' burdens as she watched the rituals unfold. They had faced the shadows, each generation wrestling with the fear that lingered in the corners of the manor. She could sense their determination, their resilience as they fought to maintain the balance, and in that moment, she understood the sacrifices they had made. The visions shifted, revealing the darker moments in Ravenshade's history. Emily saw the shadows creeping in, their tendrils coiling around her ancestors' hearts, feeding on their doubts and fears. Each generation had battled against the encroaching darkness, but with each defeat, the shadows had grown stronger, finding cracks in the foundation of their resolve. With each heartbeat, the visions became more vivid, each scene merging into the next. Emily felt the anguish of those who had come before her, their struggles etched into the very walls of the manor. She could see the toll it had taken on them, the weariness in their eyes, the shadows beneath their skin. They had fought valiantly, but the darkness had left scars that had yet to heal. Yet, even amidst the despair, flickers of hope emerged. Emily watched as her ancestors found solace in each other, their bonds strengthening in the face of adversity. They had leaned on one another, forging a sense of community that transcended the darkness. She saw the laughter shared during fleeting moments of joy, the warmth of love illuminating the shadows, reminding her that light could exist even in the darkest of times. The visions began to coalesce, revealing a pivotal moment in Ravenshade's history, a gathering of her ancestors in this very chamber, candles lit and hearts united. They had invoked the ancient symbols, calling upon the strength of their lineage to protect their home from the encroaching darkness. Emily felt their energy merge, a palpable force that surged through her, igniting her own resolve. As the visions swirled around her, Emily understood that the shadows were not merely an external threat. They were a manifestation of fear, anxiety, and unresolved pain. Her ancestors had fought bravely, but the cycle of fear had perpetuated, leaving behind echoes of sorrow. It was a burden that now fell to her, the latest guardian of Ravenshade Manor. With a deep breath, Emily willed herself to break free from the trance, the echoes of the past settling into her consciousness. She opened her eyes, the chamber around her now suffused with a sense of clarity. The stories of her ancestors were no longer just echoes. They were a call to action, a reminder that she carried their legacy within her. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the chamber, and Emily felt a renewed sense of determination surge within her. She was not merely a vessel of light. She was a bridge between the past and the future, tasked with ensuring that the sacrifices of her ancestors were not in vain. The shadows may have retreated for now, but they were a reminder of the battles yet to be fought. Her gaze turned toward the passage leading deeper into the manor, the air thick with anticipation. The mysteries that lay ahead called to her, whispering promises of understanding and insight. She felt an overwhelming urge to uncover the truth of her lineage, to understand the roots of the darkness that had plagued her family for generations. With each step, she felt the weight of her ancestors guiding her forward. Their stories resonated within her, illuminating the path ahead. Emily ventured toward the passage, the flickering candle casting a warm glow that cut through the darkness. The air felt alive with possibility, and she could sense the energy of the manor shifting around her. As she descended into the depths of Ravenshade, she was acutely aware of the history etched into the walls, each crack and crevice holding the memories of those who had walked this path before her. The shadows lingered, but they were no longer a source of fear. They were a reminder of her purpose, a call to understand the darkness and to heal the wounds that had been left unaddressed. The passage twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the heart of the manor. The walls closed in around her, the air growing cooler as she descended into the unknown. Emily felt the vibrations beneath her feet, a hum of energy that resonated with her very being. Each step brought her closer to the truth, a truth that had been hidden for too long. Emerging into a vast cavern, Emily was struck by the sheer magnitude of the space. The ceiling arched high above her, the stone walls adorned with intricate carvings that shimmered in the dim light. A deep pool of water glistened in the center, reflecting the flickering candlelight like a mirror of the past. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and Emily could feel the energy pulsing through the chamber. It was a place of power, a nexus where the light and dark converged. She approached the water, drawn to its depths as if it held the secrets she sought. Peering into the surface, she could see her reflection distorted by the ripples. But it was not just her image staring back. Shadows danced along the edges, weaving in and out like ghosts, remnants of the past that lingered in this sacred space. Emily felt a chill run down her spine, but she stood firm, unwilling to shy away from the truth. As she knelt beside the pool, Emily reached out, her fingertips grazing the surface of the water. A jolt of energy coursed through her, and the reflections deepened, revealing flashes of moments long gone. She saw her ancestors standing beside her, their faces etched with determination as they gazed into the water, seeking guidance and understanding. With each ripple, the stories of Ravenshade unfolded. Rituals performed to ward off the darkness, moments of connection and loss, the laughter of children playing in the sun, and the sorrow of those who had succumbed to despair. The echoes of their lives resonated within her, each memory weaving together to form a tapestry of resilience and hope. Emily understood now that the water was a conduit to the past, a place where she could commune with her ancestors and gain insight into the battles they had fought. She closed her eyes, allowing the energy of the cavern to envelop her, and surrendered herself to the memories that awaited her. In that moment, she felt a wave of understanding wash over her. The darkness was not merely an enemy. It was a reflection of her family's fears and struggles, a manifestation of the unresolved pain that had haunted them for generations. Each ancestor had faced their own demons, and in their battles, they had woven a legacy of strength and unity. As she immersed herself in the memories, Emily began to see the patterns that had emerged through time. The shadows had found ways to exploit their weaknesses, to seep into their hearts and minds, perpetuating a cycle of fear and despair. But amidst the darkness, there had always been light, a flicker of hope that had guided them forward. With a surge of determination, she knew she had the power to break this cycle. She was the one who could heal the wounds of the past, to confront the shadows that lingered within her family's history. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to face the challenges that awaited her. As the visions began to fade, Emily opened her eyes, gazing into the depths of the pool once more. The water had settled, reflecting the candlelight like 1,000 stars. She felt a sense of clarity wash over her, the weight of her ancestors' struggles transforming into a sense of purpose. Standing at the edge of the pool, Emily felt the connection to her lineage deepen. She was not alone in this fight. The spirits of her ancestors stood beside her, guiding her steps as she embarked on the next chapter of her journey. With renewed resolve, she turned away from the pool and faced the cavern, ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. The shadows had their stories, and it was time for her to write her own. She stepped forward, each footfall resonating with the energy of the manor. The echoes of the past would serve as her guide, illuminating the path toward understanding, healing, and ultimately redemption. Chapter 11. The Unveiling of Secrets. The cavern felt alive as Emily took her first steps into the unknown, the air thrumming with energy and anticipation. Shadows flickered along the walls, and the warm glow of the candle illuminated the path ahead, casting elongated silhouettes that seemed to dance in rhythm with her heartbeat. With each stride, she felt the weight of her ancestors behind her, their spirits urging her forward into the depths of Ravenshade Manor. As she ventured deeper into the cavern, the atmosphere shifted, thickening with an electric tension. The walls, lined with ancient markings and symbols, told stories of forgotten rituals and long-lost secrets. Emily felt a pull toward them, an instinctive desire to uncover the truths hidden within their intricate patterns. Each symbol resonated with a sense of purpose, a testament to the struggles of those who had come before her. In the dim light, the chamber opened up before her, revealing a vast expanse filled with twisting stone formations and pools of shimmering water. The ground was uneven, with patches of damp earth and scattered stones that glistened like jewels under the flickering candlelight. Emily stepped carefully, aware of the power that lay within this sacred space, and she felt as if she were walking on hallowed ground. The pools of water, scattered throughout the chamber, seemed to pulse with energy. Each one appeared to reflect not only her image but also fleeting glimpses of the past. Visions of rituals performed, connections forged, and battles fought. Emily was entranced, drawn to the closest pool as though it held the key to unlocking the secrets she sought. Kneeling beside it, she gazed into the depths of the water. The surface shimmered, revealing fragmented images of her ancestors. Their faces etched with determination, the flicker of candlelight illuminating their features. She saw the moment they had made their vows to protect Ravenshade, pledging to keep the darkness at bay and preserve their legacy. Each vision seemed to whisper stories of courage, resilience, and sacrifice, igniting a fire within her heart. As she watched, the images morphed and shifted, unveiling a darker chapter in the manor's history. Shadows coiled around the figures, seeping into their hearts, filling them with doubt and fear. Emily could feel the weight of their struggles, the emotional turmoil that had woven itself into the very fabric of Ravenshade. The darkness was not just an external threat. It was a reflection of their inner demons, a manifestation of the pain and sorrow they had carried for generations. The visions began to coalesce, revealing a powerful moment that Emily had never encountered before. She witnessed a great gathering in the cavern, her ancestors standing united against a formidable force. The energy in the air was palpable, charged with determination as they prepared to confront the shadows that had plagued them for so long. They were armed not only with candles and ancient symbols, but with an unbreakable bond forged through shared struggles. Emily felt the weight of their collective hope, their unyielding belief that light could triumph over darkness. Yet, as the confrontation unfolded, she also saw the cracks in their resolve. The shadows taunted them, whispering doubts that seeped into their hearts. For every moment of strength, there was an equal measure of fear, and Emily understood that the battle was as much within as it was without. The scene shifted again, this time revealing the aftermath of the confrontation. The chamber lay in ruins, remnants of the battle scattered across the floor. The flickering candlelight was diminished, and the once vibrant spirits of her ancestors now appeared weary and broken. Emily felt a surge of emotion as she witnessed the toll the battle had taken on them, the scars left behind by both the physical and emotional wounds. The energy of the chamber shifted once more, drawing her attention to a hidden alcove at the far end. Curiosity sparked within her, urging her to explore further. With a determined heart, she stood, the flickering candlelight guiding her steps as she approached the concealed space. The shadows seemed to swirl around her, yet instead of fear, she felt a sense of belonging, a connection to the very essence of Ravenshade. As she reached the alcove, Emily discovered a stone archway adorned with intricate carvings. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsating in harmony with her heartbeat, as if acknowledging her presence. She pressed her hand against the cold stone, feeling a rush of energy surge through her fingertips, igniting the symbols with a vibrant light. The archway seemed to respond, and Emily stepped through it, entering a hidden chamber bathed in ethereal light. The atmosphere was thick with history, and the air shimmered with the weight of untold stories. In the center of the chamber stood a large stone pedestal, adorned with more carvings that glimmered in the light, inviting her closer. Approaching the pedestal, Emily examined the symbols etched into its surface. They told a tale of the manor's history, revealing the cycles of light and darkness that had played out over generations. Each symbol resonated with energy, intertwining the stories of her ancestors with her own, reminding her that she was part of something much greater. As she studied the pedestal, Emily's gaze was drawn to a small, ornate box resting upon it. Intrigued, she carefully lifted the lid, revealing a collection of objects, ancient tokens, amulets, and small trinkets, each one carrying the weight of its own story. A sense of reverence washed over her as she recognized the significance of these artifacts, each one a testament to the struggles and victories of her ancestors. Among the items, she found a delicate silver locket, intricately engraved with a family crest. She opened it to reveal a portrait of a woman whose features resembled her own, a long-lost ancestor whose name echoed through the corridors of time. The locket pulsed with energy, and Emily felt a deep connection to the woman within, as though their souls were intertwined across the fabric of history. Clutching the locket tightly, she felt a rush of understanding. This chamber, this hidden sanctuary, was a wellspring of her lineage, a place where the past converged with the present. Each object represented a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the stories that had shaped her family's journey. With every item she touched, she felt the weight of their sacrifices, their love, and their unwavering commitment to protect the light within Ravenshade. Suddenly, a vision flashed before her eyes, a gathering of her ancestors, standing together in this very chamber, united by purpose. They held the artifacts close, drawing strength from the shared energy that radiated between them. Emily could feel their determination, a collective resolve that surged through the air, igniting the candlelight around her. The vision shifted again, revealing a moment of desperation, a fracture in their unity as doubt began to seep into their hearts. Emily recognized the vulnerability that had plagued them, the shadows that crept in when hope seemed distant. It was a reminder of the power of fear, the way it could divide even the strongest bonds. Determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past, Emily took a deep breath, her heart steady with purpose. She understood that she was not merely an observer. She was a participant in this ongoing narrative. The shadows may have taken their toll, but she had the power to forge a new path, to unite her family's legacy in a way that would honor their sacrifices and propel her forward. With renewed resolve, she gathered the artifacts, each one a token of her ancestors' strength and resilience. She felt their energy coursing through her, binding her to the legacy of Ravenshade. The shadows would no longer dictate the course of her journey. She would wield the light and the wisdom of those who had come before her. As she turned to leave the hidden chamber, the candlelight flickered, casting a warm glow around her. The air felt charged with possibility, a tangible reminder that she was not alone in this fight. The echoes of her ancestors resonated within her, a chorus of hope that accompanied her every step. Emerging back into the main cavern, Emily felt a sense of purpose wash over her. The shadows still loomed, but now they felt less ominous, more like a challenge to be faced. The stories of her ancestors had ignited a fire within her, a determination to confront the darkness head-on and reclaim the light that had been lost. With each stride, she felt the weight of their legacy propelling her forward, a guiding force that would not let her falter. She was the keeper of their stories, the guardian of Ravenshade, and she would ensure that their sacrifices were honored. The chamber echoed with her resolve as she stepped deeper into the heart of the manor. The shadows danced around her, but she walked with purpose, her heart steady and her spirit unyielding. Emily was ready to face the challenges ahead, to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within Ravenshade, and to embrace her role as the guardian of her family's legacy. Chapter 12: The Gathering Storm. With the artifacts securely tucked away, Emily's resolve strengthened. The shadows loomed large in her mind, a palpable reminder of the struggles her ancestors had faced. The cavern's energy thrummed beneath her feet, urging her forward. She knew she had to confront the darkness head-on. This was her inheritance, a burden she had willingly accepted. As she made her way back through the cavern, the flickering candlelight cast shadows that danced along the stone walls. The memories of her ancestors echoed in her mind, their faces filled with both determination and despair. Each step was a reminder that she was part of a legacy that could not be allowed to fade into the darkness. Emerging from the cavern into the main hall of Ravenshade, Emily took a moment to gather her thoughts. The grand entrance loomed before her, its imposing structure a testament to the generations that had walked these halls. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light filtering through the tall windows, illuminating the faded portraits of her ancestors. They seemed to watch her, their expressions a mixture of pride and expectation, as if urging her to embrace her destiny. She paused before one particular portrait, that of her great-aunt who had first taken up the mantle of guardian. The weight of her gaze felt heavy on Emily's shoulders, but it also ignited a fire within her. She was reminded that she was not just a solitary figure fighting against the shadows. She was part of a lineage, a family bound by blood and duty. With newfound determination, Emily moved through the manor, the air thick with the scents of aged wood and lingering memories. She navigated the corridors with purpose, her heart steady as she sought out the library, the heart of knowledge within Ravenshade. It was a place filled with the wisdom of her ancestors, and she felt drawn to it, knowing it held answers to the questions brewing in her mind. Upon entering the library, she was enveloped in the familiar smell of old books and parchment. The towering shelves lined with leather-bound volumes stood like sentinels, their spines a mosaic of history and knowledge. A sense of calm washed over her as she moved through the aisles, her fingertips grazing the spines of the books, absorbing the energy they emanated. Emily made her way to the central table, a large wooden structure scarred with the marks of time. Sprawled across it lay a collection of tomes, their pages filled with the arcane knowledge passed down through generations. She settled into a chair, the weight of the locket around her neck a comforting reminder of her ancestors' strength. Opening the first book, she was immediately drawn into a world of ancient rituals and protective spells. The inked words danced before her eyes, revealing the intricate dance between light and darkness that had played out throughout Ravenshade's history. She read about the great battles fought by her ancestors, their struggles to maintain the balance, and the sacrifices they had made to keep the shadows at bay. As she turned the pages, a sense of urgency gripped her. Time was of the essence, and she needed to understand the rituals that could fortify her resolve and protect the manor. The shadows were not merely a thing of the past. They were an ever-present threat that sought to reclaim what had once been lost. Hours passed as Emily pored over the texts, each discovery revealing more about the manor's history. The candles flickered in response to her concentration, their flames reflecting the fire building within her. She discovered the significance of the artifacts she had found, each one a key to unlocking the protective barriers her ancestors had crafted against the encroaching darkness. Among the tomes, she unearthed a fragile scroll that seemed to pulse with energy. Carefully, she unfurled it, revealing an ancient ritual that called upon the spirits of her ancestors to strengthen the defenses of Ravenshade. The words were written in a flowing script, each letter imbued with purpose. Emily's heart raced as she recognized the implications of what she had found. A way to not only confront the shadows, but to bind her ancestors' strength to her own. With a sense of urgency, she committed the ritual to memory, each incantation resonating within her. The shadows outside whispered ominously, a reminder that time was slipping away. She could sense the gathering storm, the weight of darkness pressing against the manor's walls, and she knew she had to act swiftly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue through the library's windows, Emily felt a shift in the atmosphere. The shadows grew bolder, inching closer to the manor's embrace. She gathered the artifacts, clutching the locket tightly as she made her way toward the grand hall, the place where her ancestors had once stood united against the encroaching darkness. The air felt electric as she entered the hall, the flickering candles casting shadows that danced along the walls. Emily could feel the weight of history around her, the spirits of her ancestors guiding her steps. She approached the center of the room, her heart steady, and began to arrange the artifacts on the floor in a circle. With each piece she placed, she felt the energy within the room shift, the air thickening with anticipation. The shadows whispered, their presence palpable as they coiled around the edges of the hall, seeking a way to invade her sanctuary. But Emily stood firm, drawing strength from the knowledge she had uncovered, from the spirits of her ancestors who had once fought against the darkness. As she completed the circle, she knelt in the center, the artifacts surrounding her like a protective barrier. She closed her eyes, focusing on the scroll and the ancient words etched into her memory. The air vibrated with energy, and she could feel the pull of her ancestors, their spirits intertwining with her own. Emily took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. She began to recite the incantation, her voice steady and strong. The words flowed from her lips like a river, each syllable imbued with the power of generations. As she spoke, the candles flickered wildly, illuminating the room with a brilliant light. The shadows writhed at the edges of the hall, sensing the surge of energy within Emily. They clawed at the air, desperate to breach the protective barrier she was creating. But she pressed on, her voice rising in strength, calling upon the spirits of her ancestors to join her in the battle against the darkness. The air crackled with power as the energy swirled around her, enveloping her in a warm embrace. She could feel the presence of her ancestors standing beside her, their spirits lending her strength. Together, they formed a united front against the shadows, a bond that transcended time and space. As the final words of the incantation left her lips, a blinding light erupted from the circle of artifacts, illuminating the entire hall. The shadows recoiled, their tendrils retreating as the light expanded, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Emily felt the warmth of her ancestors' energy flooding through her, a powerful force that coursed through her veins. With each heartbeat, the light grew stronger, illuminating every corner of the room. The shadows shrieked, their voices a cacophony of despair as they fought against the brilliance. But Emily stood firm, her heart steady, knowing that she was not alone in this battle. The light enveloped her, a cocoon of warmth and protection. She could feel the spirits of her ancestors surrounding her, their strength merging with her own. In that moment, she understood that she was the culmination of their sacrifices, the embodiment of their hope. The shadows writhed and twisted, their forms losing substance as they were pushed back by the radiant light. Emily's heart soared as she felt the tide turning. The darkness that had once threatened to consume her was now receding, banished by the united strength of her lineage. But the battle was not over. She could still sense the remnants of the shadows lingering at the edges, clawing for a foothold. Drawing upon the strength of the light, she focused her energy, channeling it toward the remaining darkness. With a determined heart, she poured her essence into the light, urging it to expand and envelop every inch of the hall. The shadows shrieked, their cries echoing through the chamber as the light surged forward, obliterating their presence. Emily felt the power of her ancestors with her, a tidal wave of energy that surged through her veins, fueling her determination. She was not just a guardian. She was a warrior, and she would fight for the legacy of Ravenshade. With one final surge of energy, the light exploded outward, engulfing the last remnants of the shadows. The room was filled with an ethereal glow, illuminating the walls and casting away the darkness that had long haunted the manor. Emily felt a sense of triumph wash over her, the weight of generations lifting as the shadows were finally banished. As the light began to fade, she knelt in the center of the circle, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The room was still, the oppressive atmosphere replaced with a serene calm. Emily looked around, taking in the remnants of the battle. The artifacts scattered across the floor, the candles flickering gently as if in acknowledgement of her victory. In that moment of silence, she felt the presence of her ancestors surrounding her, their spirits embracing her with warmth and gratitude. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, not as an isolated figure, but as a part of a greater legacy. Their sacrifices had not been in vain. She had honored their memory and preserved the light of Ravenshade. With a deep breath, Emily gathered the artifacts and placed them back on the pedestal, a silent promise to safeguard their legacy. The shadows may have retreated for now, but she understood that her journey was far from over. The darkness would always linger, waiting for an opportunity to return. But she was prepared, armed with the knowledge, strength, and unity of her ancestors. As she left the grand hall, the weight of her victory settled upon her. The manor felt different, as if a shroud had been lifted. The air was filled with the echoes of hope, the promise of new beginnings. Emily was ready to continue the fight, to explore the depths of Ravenshade, and to uncover the remaining secrets that lay hidden within its walls. The shadows may have gathered, but so too had the light. She was a guardian of the past, a beacon of hope for the future, and she would ensure that the legacy of Ravenshade would endure for generations to come. Chapter 13. The Echoes of the Past. The triumph of the previous night hung in the air like the lingering notes of a powerful melody, a resonance that vibrated through the very walls of Ravenshade. Emily stood in the grand hall, the remnants of the battle against the shadows echoing in her mind. The air felt lighter, yet a sense of urgency flickered in her chest. Though the immediate threat had receded, she knew the darkness was not vanquished entirely. It had simply retreated to regroup. In the wake of the confrontation, Emily felt an insatiable need to explore the depths of Ravenshade further. The manor held countless secrets, and she was determined to uncover them. With the artifacts safely returned to their pedestal, she turned her attention to the expansive corridors that stretched out before her, each door a gateway to the unknown. As she traversed the hallways, the flickering candlelight illuminated her path, casting long shadows that danced against the walls. The portraits of her ancestors gazed down at her, their expressions a blend of pride and expectation. Emily felt their presence surrounding her, a steady reassurance that bolstered her resolve. She reached a narrow staircase at the end of the corridor, its worn steps leading downward into the manor's depths. A chill crept up her spine, but it was not one of fear. It was a shiver of anticipation. What secrets lay below? What stories had been buried in the silence of time? With each step, the air grew cooler, the walls narrowing until they seemed to close in around her. At the bottom of the staircase, Emily emerged into a dimly lit chamber, its atmosphere thick with history. Dust motes hung in the air like tiny stars, illuminated by the faint light filtering through a narrow window set high above. The stone walls were adorned with faded murals, depicting scenes of her ancestors in moments of both celebration and strife. She could feel the weight of their stories pressing down on her, their struggles intertwined with her own. In the center of the room stood an ancient table, its surface covered with scrolls and manuscripts, remnants of the knowledge that had been passed down through generations. Emily approached, brushing her fingers across the fragile pages. The dust felt like a layer of time, concealing the wisdom that lay within. One scroll caught her eye, a thick, weathered piece tied with a faded ribbon. She carefully unfastened it, her heart racing with curiosity as she unfurled the parchment. The words were elegantly inscribed, telling tales of rituals designed to fortify the spirit and protect against the encroaching darkness. Emily felt a sense of kinship with the writer, as if the very ink had been infused with the essence of their soul. As she read, she began to understand the depths of her ancestors' struggles. They had faced the shadows not only with courage, but with a profound understanding of the balance between light and dark. Each ritual outlined in the scroll resonated with her, a call to honor their legacy by forging her own path. Emily spent what felt like hours lost in the scrolls, her surroundings fading as she immersed herself in the stories of those who had come before her. Each tale was a thread woven into the tapestry of Ravenshade, and she could feel the strength of their connections pulsing through her veins. She was not just a descendant. She was a continuation of their fight, a vessel for their hopes and dreams. As she turned to a particularly intricate manuscript, an image leaped out at her, an ornate sigil, radiant and powerful. It mirrored the patterns she had seen in the cavern, the same symbols that had come alive during her confrontation with the shadows. A realization dawned on her. This sigil was a key to understanding the heart of the manor, the very essence of what it meant to be a guardian. With renewed determination, Emily gathered the scrolls and manuscripts, tucking them under her arm. She needed to find a place where she could study them in peace, to delve deeper into the rituals and symbols that had been preserved within Ravenshade. The library would be the perfect sanctuary for her quest. Climbing back up the staircase, she moved through the corridors with purpose. The flickering candles illuminated her path, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the chill of the stone walls. As she approached the library, She felt a sense of anticipation building within her, a powerful urge to unlock the mysteries that lay ahead. Upon entering the library, the familiar scent of aged parchment and ink enveloped her. Emily settled at the large central table, laying the scrolls and manuscripts before her. The vastness of the library filled her with awe. It was a sanctuary of knowledge, a treasure trove of the wisdom her ancestors had painstakingly preserved. She began with the sigil, sketching it carefully on a blank page in her notebook. As she traced the intricate lines, she could feel the energy within the symbol resonating with her own. It felt alive, pulsing with potential. Emily's heart raced as she considered the possibilities it held. With the sigil firmly in her mind, she turned her attention to the scrolls. Each one was filled with rituals and practices that had been handed down through generations. They detailed methods for harnessing the energy of the manor, rituals to summon the spirits of her ancestors, and incantations designed to weave protective barriers against the darkness. Hours slipped by as she pored over the texts, her fingers dancing over the pages as she absorbed the knowledge within. The candlelight flickered, casting elongated shadows that whispered secrets only the walls could hear. She felt a connection to the spirits of her ancestors, their presence guiding her as she deciphered their wisdom. In the midst of her studies, a sense of urgency began to gnaw at her. The shadows that had retreated were still out there, lurking on the edges of Ravenshade, waiting for an opportunity to reclaim their foothold. Emily understood that she could not delay. She had to act while she had the knowledge and energy to confront the darkness. With determination coursing through her veins, Emily focused on the protective rituals outlined in the scrolls. She compiled a plan, outlining the steps she needed to take to reinforce the manor's defenses. The sigil would serve as a focal point, a beacon of light to guide her as she enacted the rituals. Just as she prepared to gather the necessary items, a sudden chill swept through the library, causing the candles to flicker ominously. Emily paused, her heart racing as she sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The shadows were not just lingering. They were gathering strength, coiling like serpents in the corners of the room. She could feel their presence intensifying, the air thickening with their malevolent energy. Emily's instincts kicked in, and she quickly gathered the scrolls, tucking them securely beneath her arm. She had to act fast. The shadows would not give her the luxury of time. With a steadying breath, she made her way toward the door, but the moment she stepped into the hallway, she felt a cold rush of wind sweep past her, as if the shadows themselves were chasing her. Heart pounding, she hurried down the corridor, her footsteps echoing ominously against the stone floor. As she approached the grand hall, Emily felt the shadows close in around her, their whispers swirling like a tempest in her mind. She could almost see their forms shifting in the periphery of her vision, dark tendrils stretching out to ensnare her. But she pressed on, fueled by the knowledge she had gained, the strength of her ancestors guiding her. Entering the grand hall, she immediately sensed a change in the atmosphere. The room felt charged with energy, the air thick with tension. Emily quickly moved to the center of the hall, setting the scrolls down on the stone floor. She needed to perform the protective rituals without delay. The sigil she had sketched earlier felt warm against her skin, a constant reminder of the power she could harness. With her heart racing, she began to arrange the artifacts around her, creating a protective circle as outlined in the scrolls. The shadows writhed at the edges of the room, their presence a constant reminder of the looming threat. As she completed the circle, Emily knelt in its center, focusing her energy on the sigil. She closed her eyes, allowing the flickering candlelight to wash over her, grounding herself in the moment. The whispers of the shadows grew louder, a cacophony of despair and anger that sought to disrupt her focus. Emily took a deep breath, drawing upon the knowledge she had acquired. She envisioned the protective barriers her ancestors had crafted, their energy mingling with her own as she began to recite the incantation from memory. Each word resonated within her, intertwining with the energy of the manor and the spirits of her ancestors. The shadows surged forward, their tendrils reaching for her as she spoke the words of protection. But Emily stood firm, her heart steady and her spirit unyielding. The sigil glowed brightly, illuminating the hall with a brilliant light that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. With every syllable, the light intensified, bathing the room in warmth and strength. The shadows shrieked, their forms twisting in agony as they were repelled by the radiant energy. Emily felt the power of her ancestors flowing through her, a torrent of strength that fortified her resolve. As she continued the incantation, the room transformed into a sanctuary of light. The shadows recoiled, their forms losing substance as the protective barriers took shape around her. Emily's heart soared. She could feel the tide of the battle shifting in her favor. In that moment, she understood the importance of her lineage. She was not just a guardian. She was a beacon of hope, a bridge between the past and the future. The energy surged around her, intertwining with her spirit as she pressed on, determined to banish the darkness once and for all. With one final surge of energy, Emily unleashed the full power of the sigil. A brilliant light erupted from her center, enveloping the entire hall in a cocoon of warmth and protection. The shadows shrieked in fury, their presence dissipating as the light engulfed them. As the last remnants of darkness faded away, the grand hall was left in a serene silence. Emily knelt on the stone floor, breathless but filled with a profound sense of accomplishment. She had faced the shadows and emerged victorious, guided by the strength of her ancestors and the wisdom they had bestowed upon her. The air felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere that had once loomed over Ravenshade lifting like a heavy fog. Emily knew that the battle against darkness would continue, but she was prepared. With each ritual she had performed, she had fortified the manor's defenses, ensuring that the light would prevail. As she gathered the scrolls and artifacts, a sense of peace settled over her. The echoes of her ancestors filled the hall, their spirits intertwining with her own as she vowed to protect Ravenshade and honor their legacy. The shadows may have retreated, but Emily understood that the fight for the light would never truly end. With renewed purpose, she ascended the staircase, her heart steady and her mind focused. She was ready to embrace her role as guardian, to explore the depths of Ravenshade, and to continue uncovering the mysteries that lay hidden within its walls. The echoes of the past guided her steps, their whispers a reminder of the strength she carried within her. Chapter 14. The Unraveling Threads. As dawn broke over Ravenshade, the first light of day spilled through the manor's tall windows, casting a golden hue across the stone floors. Emily stood in the grand hall, her heart still racing from the intense confrontation with the shadows. She could feel the residual warmth of the protective energy that had enveloped her, a lingering reminder of her victory. Yet, even as she basked in the aftermath of her triumph, a nagging sense of urgency tugged at her, urging her to delve deeper into the mysteries that surrounded her. The morning sun illuminated the intricate patterns of the sigil she had etched in the center of the hall, now faint but still visible. It seemed to pulse gently with a life of its own, a beacon of hope amidst the lingering shadows. Emily felt a kinship with the manor, as if the very walls recognized her presence and the weight of her lineage. She had solidified her role as its guardian, but she knew that the shadows were not merely vanquished. They had retreated into the recesses of the manor, biding their time. Driven by this realization, she gathered her scrolls and manuscripts, meticulously organizing them on the grand table in the hall. The library had provided a wealth of knowledge, and Emily knew that understanding her ancestors' history would be crucial in her continued fight against the darkness. As she spread the text before her, the sunlight caught the dust motes floating in the air, creating a shimmering tapestry of light. Each speck represented a story, a fragment of the past waiting to be discovered. Emily flipped through the pages of the manuscripts, her fingers tracing the delicate script. The rituals outlined within spoke not only of protection but also of communion with the spirits of her ancestors. They emphasized the importance of connection, of weaving a tapestry that bound the past, present, and future together. As she absorbed the knowledge, the weight of responsibility pressed against her heart. She was tasked not only with guarding Ravenshade, but also with honoring the legacy of those who had come before her. Among the scrolls, One particular manuscript caught her attention. It detailed an ancient ritual, one that required a gathering of various natural elements to create a powerful conduit for energy. Emily's eyes widened as she read the instructions. Earth from the sacred grounds, water from the nearby stream, fire from the hearth, and air from the highest tower. Each element represented a fundamental aspect of existence, and combining them would amplify her connection to the manor's energy. Excitement coursed through her veins as she envisioned the potential of the ritual. The process would not only deepen her bond with the manor, but also enhance her ability to sense the encroaching darkness. She could feel the pulse of the manor beneath her feet, as if it was alive and responding to her thoughts. With newfound purpose, she began to make a list of what she would need for the ritual. The thought of gathering the elements ignited a spark of determination within her. She would start with the earth, a grounding force that symbolized stability and strength. The sacred grounds, a hidden grove located at the edge of the manor's sprawling property, were said to be a place where the spirits of her ancestors still lingered. She could picture it in her mind, a secluded haven where nature thrived, untouched by time. The grove would be the perfect place to connect with the energy of the earth. Emily took a moment to prepare herself, collecting a small pouch and a sturdy walking stick. With each step through the grand hall and out into the sprawling grounds, she felt a sense of purpose driving her forward. The manor, once shrouded in shadows and mystery, now felt like an extension of herself, its secrets interwoven with her own. As she stepped outside, the crisp morning air filled her lungs, refreshing and invigorating. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn. The vibrant colors of the autumn foliage painted the landscape in warm hues of orange and gold, a stunning contrast to the darkness that had threatened her home. Emily felt the energy of the world around her, a vibrant tapestry of life and color that pulsed in harmony with her own heartbeat. The path to the sacred grove wound through a thicket of trees, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. As she walked, Emily became acutely aware of the sounds of nature surrounding her. The rustling leaves, the distant call of birds, and the gentle whisper of the wind. Each sound resonated within her, reinforcing her connection to the earth and the lineage of guardianship she had inherited. Upon reaching the grove, Emily paused to take in the serene beauty of the space. Tall trees stood sentinel around the clearing, their gnarled roots twisting through the earth like ancient serpents. Sunlight streamed through the branches, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a fragrant reminder of the cycle of life and death that defined the natural world. In the center of the grove lay a circle of stones, weathered and worn by time. Emily approached reverently, kneeling before the sacred site. The energy here was palpable, a hum that resonated through the ground and into her bones. She could feel the spirits of her ancestors guiding her, their presence weaving through the air like a gentle breeze. With a sense of purpose, Emily carefully dug her fingers into the earth, gathering a handful of soil. It felt rich and alive, teeming with the essence of life itself. She placed the earth into her pouch, feeling a surge of energy as she did so. This was not merely dirt. It was a connection to the past, a thread that tied her to the guardians who had come before her. Next, she made her way to the nearby stream, its crystal-clear waters flowing over smooth stones. The sound of the water was soothing, a melodic symphony that echoed through the grove. Kneeling at the water's edge, she cupped her hands and filled them with the cool, refreshing liquid. As the water cascaded through her fingers, Emily closed her eyes, allowing the energy of the stream to wash over her. It felt like a cleansing, purifying her spirit and reinforcing her resolve. With both earth and water secured in her pouch, Emily turned her attention to the next element, fire. The hearth within Ravenshade held the promise of warmth and safety, but it also contained the fierce energy of transformation. She envisioned the flames dancing within the fireplace, their flickering light chasing away the shadows. With a determined spirit, she made her way back to the manor, eager to harness the fiery essence that had been a part of her home for generations. Entering the grand hall, Emily approached the hearth, its darkened stones still bearing the residue of past fires. She carefully gathered a small ember from the ashes, placing it gently in her pouch. The warmth radiated through her fingers, a comforting reminder of the light that had fought against the darkness. Finally, she needed to capture the essence of air, the final element in her ritual. The highest tower of Ravenshade had always intrigued her, its towering height offering a perspective unlike any other. Climbing the narrow spiral staircase, Emily felt her heart quicken as she ascended. Each step echoed with purpose, and she could almost hear the whispers of the wind beckoning her onward. Upon reaching the top, she emerged onto the tower's balcony, a breathtaking view unfolding before her. The expansive landscape stretched out endlessly, the horizon kissed by the golden hues of the rising sun. The wind swept through her hair, carrying with it the promise of freedom and possibility. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, feeling the air fill her lungs and invigorate her spirit. With a sense of reverence, Emily raised her arms to the sky, embracing the wind as it enveloped her. She felt the air swirling around her, a palpable energy that danced with life. In that moment, she understood that this was not merely an element. It was the breath of the universe, a connection to all living things. After capturing a small vial of air in her pouch, Emily descended from the tower, her heart brimming with excitement and anticipation. With all four elements gathered, she felt a surge of energy coursing through her, a tapestry of strength woven from earth, water, fire, and air. The ritual she had envisioned was within her grasp, and she could hardly contain her eagerness to begin. Returning to the grand hall, she laid out the elements on the floor, carefully arranging them according to the instructions outlined in the manuscripts. Each component represented a vital aspect of her connection to Ravenshade and the spirits of her ancestors. Emily felt the air thrum with anticipation as she prepared to ignite the energy she had gathered. As she knelt in the center of the circle, the weight of her responsibility settled upon her like a mantle. This ritual was not just about harnessing power. It was about honoring her lineage and acknowledging the sacrifices made by those who had come before her. She closed her eyes, drawing in a deep breath as she began to visualize the tapestry of energy she would create. With her heart steady, Emily reached for the ember of fire, cradling it in her palms. She focused on the warmth, feeling it resonate with her spirit. As she began to chant the ancient incantation from memory, she felt the energy of the four elements swirl around her, intertwining like threads of light. Each word resonated with the very fabric of Ravenshade, a plea for protection and guidance. As she spoke, the air thickened, pulsing with energy. The ember ignited, flames licking at the air with vibrant colors, their warmth enveloping her like a protective embrace. The earth and water began to vibrate in response, their essences merging with the fire's energy. Emily felt the power coalesce around her, a protective barrier forming as she wove her intentions into the ritual. The crescendo of energy rose, filling the hall with a brilliant light that chased away the remnants of darkness. Shadows that had once lingered at the edges began to retreat, vanishing into the recesses of the manor. Emily felt the presence of her ancestors surround her, their spirits guiding her as she anchored the energy in place. With the final words of the incantation uttered, a brilliant flash erupted from the center of the hall, illuminating every corner of Ravenshade. The protective barrier solidified, a cocoon of light that shimmered like the morning sun. Emily knelt in awe, her heart racing as she felt the energy settle into the very bones of the manor. In that moment, she understood the weight of her lineage, the responsibility that lay upon her shoulders. She was not just a guardian of Ravenshade. She was a bridge between the past and the future, a thread in the intricate tapestry of life. With each ritual she performed, she would fortify the bonds that connected her to the manor and its spirits, ensuring that the light would prevail. As the glow of the ritual faded, Emily stood, filled with a sense of purpose. She looked around the hall, her heart swelling with pride. The shadows had retreated, but the battle was far from over. She had taken a significant step in her journey, but she knew there were more mysteries to uncover and more challenges to face. Determined, Emily began to gather the remnants of her ritual, storing the elements with care. Each piece held the essence of the experience, a reminder of the connection she had forged with Ravenshade. She would continue her studies, delve deeper into the knowledge of her ancestors and prepare for the next phase of her journey. With a renewed spirit, she stepped into the light of the day, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The echoes of her ancestors reverberated in her heart, their wisdom guiding her steps as she ventured further into the unknown, ready to face the shadows that lurked just beyond the edge of the light. Chapter 15. The Legacy of Ravenshade. With the dawn of a new day, the golden light of the sun poured through the grand hall of Ravenshade, illuminating the remnants of Emily's recent ritual. The air felt charged with a vibrant energy, a tangible testament to the protective barrier she had woven with the four elements. But as she stood there, surveying her surroundings, she sensed that the true work was only just beginning. The successful completion of the ritual had ignited a fire within Emily, a desire to delve deeper into the histories that had shaped her family's legacy. She turned her attention to the library, her mind racing with thoughts of the scrolls and manuscripts she had studied. Knowledge was power, and it was this power that she needed to wield effectively against the shadows that still lurked within the manor. As she made her way to the library, she felt the cool stone of the walls beneath her fingers, each touch grounding her, reminding her of the generations that had walked these halls before her. The library door creaked softly as she pushed it open, revealing the dim light filtering through the tall windows. The room was a sanctuary of knowledge, with shelves lined with dusty tomes and scrolls waiting to unveil their secrets. Emily moved through the aisles, her fingers brushing against the spines of the books, each title sparking memories of the stories they contained. She knew that within this collection lay the keys to understanding the dark forces that had plagued Ravenshade and her ancestors. The whispered tales of her family echoed in her mind as she searched for the volumes that would shed light on the past. Her gaze fell upon an old leather-bound tome resting on a high shelf, its cover adorned with intricate designs. As she reached for it, she felt a tingling sensation in her fingertips, as if the book was alive with the energy of the spirits that had once owned it. Gently, she pulled it down and opened it, revealing yellowed pages filled with meticulous handwriting and ornate illustrations. The title read, "The Chronicles of the Guardians," and Emily felt her heart race as she began to read. The book detailed the history of her lineage, tracing back to the very first guardian of Ravenshade. Each chapter spoke of struggles against dark forces, of rituals performed to protect the manor and its inhabitants, and of the sacrifices made by her ancestors in their pursuit of light. The deeper she read, the more she felt connected to the strength of those who had come before her. One entry in particular caught her attention. It described a pivotal moment in the manor's history, a confrontation with a powerful dark entity that had threatened to engulf Ravenshade in shadows. The guardian at the time had gathered the elements, just as Emily had done, and performed a grand ritual to banish the darkness. However, the entity had not been fully vanquished. Instead, it had been bound within the manor, awaiting a moment of weakness to re-emerge. A chill ran down Emily's spine as she realized the implications of what she had just read. The shadows she had confronted were not merely echoes of the past. They were remnants of a darkness that had been trapped within the very walls of Ravenshade. This knowledge ignited a flicker of fear within her, but it was quickly quelled by the resolve that surged in its place. She would not allow the darkness to reclaim its hold. Determined to continue her research, Emily carefully set the tome aside and scanned the shelves for other texts that might provide insight into the entity's nature. As she pored over the collection, she stumbled upon an old map tucked between two books. It depicted the manor grounds, but there were markings indicating hidden pathways and locations of significance. One mark in particular caught her eye, a cave labeled as the Sanctum of Shadows. A sense of foreboding washed over her as she traced the outline of the cave with her finger. It was located deep within the woods, far from the safety of Ravenshade. The cave had not been mentioned in any of the other texts she had studied, yet it felt important, a possible link to the entity that had been trapped within the manor. Emily's mind raced with possibilities. This could be the key to understanding the darkness that plagued her family. Without hesitating, she decided to follow the map. Gathering a few essential items, a flashlight, a small knife, and her pouch filled with the remnants of her previous ritual, she felt the weight of her purpose settle upon her shoulders. She was not merely venturing into the woods. She was stepping into the heart of the unknown, ready to confront the shadows head-on. As she left the library, the sun hung high in the sky, illuminating the path ahead. Emily felt the energy of the manor surrounding her, a protective warmth that reassured her. With every step she took, the forest drew nearer, its towering trees standing like ancient guardians, watching her approach with silent wisdom. The path to the cave was overgrown, the underbrush thick with brambles and creeping vines. Emily navigated carefully, her heart beating steadily with anticipation. The air grew cooler as she entered the woods, the sunlight filtering through the leaves and casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. With each step, the sounds of the manor faded, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. As she ventured deeper, the forest transformed into a maze of twisted branches and tangled roots. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. It was as if the forest itself held its breath, watching her every move. Emily could sense the weight of history in this place, the stories of those who had come before her interwoven with the very fabric of the trees. Following the map's directions, she finally stumbled upon the entrance to the cave, its dark maw yawning before her like an abyss. The mouth of the cave was adorned with ancient symbols, their meanings lost to time but resonating with an energy that prickled at her skin. She took a deep breath, steeling herself against the darkness that awaited her within. With her flashlight illuminating the path ahead, Emily stepped inside. The air was cool and damp, a stark contrast to the warmth of the sun outside. As she moved deeper into the cave, the walls glistened with moisture, the faint sound of dripping water echoing in the silence. The light from her flashlight danced along the uneven surfaces, casting eerie shadows that seemed to pulse with life. As she ventured further, she noticed strange markings etched into the stone walls, symbols that resembled those in the manuscripts she had studied. They spoke of protection and power, a language lost to the ages yet familiar to her. Emily felt a surge of determination as she traced the symbols with her fingers, her mind racing with the possibilities of their meaning. At the heart of the cave, she discovered a vast chamber, its ceiling lost to darkness. In the center stood a stone altar, weathered by time yet unmistakably significant. The altar was adorned with remnants of past offerings, wilted flowers, stones etched with symbols, and what appeared to be fragments of bone. A chill settled in her bones as she realized this was a place of reverence, a sanctuary that had once been used to commune with the spirits and harness the power of the earth. Emily approached the altar with reverence, her heart pounding in her chest. She laid her pouch of elemental remnants on the cold stone, feeling an overwhelming connection to the space. It was as if the very walls of the cave were alive, responding to her presence and acknowledging her purpose. As she stood before the altar, the shadows in the chamber seemed to shift, coiling and swirling like sentient beings. Emily's pulse quickened as she sensed the darkness gathering, a chilling presence that encroached upon her with a palpable weight. She remembered the tales from the chronicles, of the powerful entity bound within the manor's walls, and felt a sense of urgency wash over her. Determined to confront the darkness, she closed her eyes, focusing on the energy she had harnessed during her earlier rituals. The warmth of the earth, the coolness of the water, the fierce energy of the fire, and the breath of the air all swirled around her, ready to be unleashed. She visualized the sigil she had etched in the grand hall, a beacon of protection that had served her well. With her heart steady, Emily extended her hands over the altar, calling upon the energies of the elements. She could feel the air thickening around her, a tangible force that pressed against her skin. The shadows coiled in response, drawing closer, their presence darkening the chamber as if seeking to consume her light. In that moment, Emily understood that she was not merely fighting against the shadows. She was engaging in a dance of balance between light and dark. She invoked the energies of her ancestors, drawing upon their strength as guardians of Ravenshade. The cave trembled with power as she poured her intention into the ritual, her voice silent but resonant in the depths of her being. The shadows writhed, twisting and turning like a storm, challenging her with their chaotic energy. Yet, Emily stood firm, a pillar of light amidst the darkness. She visualized the elements merging, their energies intertwining in a tapestry of strength and protection. The chamber hummed with a resonance that felt ancient, a reminder of the battles fought and the victories won by those who had come before her. As the shadows pressed in, Emily opened her eyes, her vision sharp and unwavering. She could see the darkness for what it truly was, a manifestation of fear, doubt, and anger. The entity that had once threatened Ravenshade was here, and it sought to reclaim its hold. But Emily understood that it was not invincible. It was tethered to the very fears that had fueled its existence. Drawing upon the fire within her, Emily unleashed a radiant light from her core, casting it into the chamber. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as the brightness enveloped them, pushing against the suffocating darkness. She felt the energy of her ancestors surge alongside her, a chorus of voices urging her to stand firm, to confront the shadows without fear. The cave resonated with the power of her intent, and in that moment, Emily became one with the energies of the earth, water, fire, and air. She visualized the binding sigil, calling it forth to strengthen the protective barrier around Ravenshade. The symbols carved into the stone walls glowed, illuminating the chamber with a blinding light that chased away the darkness. As the shadows writhed, Emily's resolve deepened. She envisioned the entity being drawn into the light, bound by the sigils of protection that had served her family for generations. The air crackled with energy, the very fabric of reality bending to her will as she called upon the ancient spirits of her ancestors to aid her in this final confrontation. The cave trembled, a fierce battle raging between light and dark. Emily felt the energy surging through her veins, a powerful current of magic that linked her to the legacy of Ravenshade. She would not allow the shadows to prevail. She was the guardian now, the protector of her family's legacy. With one final surge of power, she raised her hands above her head, channeling every ounce of energy she had gathered. The light erupted from her palms, a brilliant beacon that illuminated the chamber in its entirety. The shadows screeched, their forms disintegrating in the face of the overwhelming light, retreating into the dark corners of the cave. Emily's heart raced as the energy enveloped her, swirling around her like a tempest. She felt the weight of the darkness lifting, the oppressive atmosphere giving way to a sense of peace. The shadows dissolved, scattered by the brilliance of her light, until only a soft glow remained in the chamber. Exhausted but triumphant, Emily lowered her hands, the light slowly fading as the remnants of the shadows vanished. The cave was now filled with a gentle glow, a serene aura that spoke of the balance she had restored. She knelt before the altar, the weight of her ancestors' legacy heavy upon her shoulders, but also filled with the knowledge that she had fulfilled her duty. As she gathered her belongings and prepared to leave the cave, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over her. She had faced the darkness, not only for herself but for all those who had come before her. She had woven the light into the very essence of Ravenshade, fortifying its legacy against the shadows that would inevitably seek to reclaim it. Stepping out of the cave, the sunlight bathed her in warmth, revitalizing her spirit. The forest that had once felt foreboding now seemed alive with energy, the vibrant colors of the leaves and the gentle rustling of the branches a testament to the harmony she had restored. Emily knew that her journey was far from over. There would always be shadows lurking in the corners, waiting for an opportunity to seep back into the world. But she was prepared. With every step she took, the knowledge she had gained from the chronicles and her experiences shaped her understanding of the intricate dance between light and dark. She was now more than just a guardian. She was a bridge between the past and the future, a keeper of her family's legacy. As she returned to Ravenshade, she vowed to continue her studies, to embrace the knowledge of her ancestors, and to protect the manor from the shadows that dared to encroach upon it. The winds whispered through the trees, carrying the echoes of her ancestors, their spirits guiding her on her path. With each passing day, Emily would cultivate her strength, fortifying the bonds that connected her to Ravenshade and the legacy of light that would shine through the darkness for generations to come.